Good evening and welcome to the select board meeting of the September 9th. If everyone would please join me for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If everyone would please make sure your phones are on silent, that would be greatly appreciated. And we have no public hearing, so for appointments, the library is going to be providing an updated presentation for us.
And coming up to the microphone should be Roger Gingrich, the Library Foundation Chair, and Lindsay Maziarz, the President of the Library Trustees. Hey, Roger?
Oh yes, I forgot my job.
The switch on
I
the
was
right.
sitting in the right seat.
Oh,
That was
next
it.
one. There you
Yeah. Sorry, team. Good evening, everybody. For those of you that don't, yes, I have the September cold, so I'll stand far from the mic. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lindsay Maziarz, and I am the chair of the Library Trustees, and I'm before you all tonight with Roger Gingrich, who is the chair of the Barrington Library Foundation. We're here tonight to present on the new library and community center being proposed on the March 2020 ballot. When thinking of how to start this presentation, I struggled a little bit. I know that I've told all of you my story so many times from the perspective of a stay-at-home parent here in town. While that's a very common story, I wanted to share a quick few others with you tonight. So I stopped in at the library this afternoon and spoke with a few staff members just to get a couple anecdotal stories for you all about some folks that maybe aren't stay-at-home parents. Where I learned about a gentleman that lives in our town. He is former military and is now retired. He doesn't have any local friends or family to connect with, so he finds himself at the library often. He seemed to come in every week around the same time when a group of residents that formed their own mahjong club invited him to join in. They laughed and talked and taught him the game. Now every week he is there with this group of people, this connection that he made that otherwise he may not have. It's important that you all understand that libraries change lives. They build community. One of the staff members emailed me after she got home from work today to tell me a couple more things. So in her words, there's a former teacher in town who comes in regularly and just recently got her husband hooked on reading. She spends at least an hour finding the right books for him and enjoys and is so proud that he's reading. One gentleman tells me that he reads to his wife every night because she can't. Another comes in on every Friday, for a date night movie for him and his wife, and asks for recommendations. I could go on and on. There are so many connections here at our library. They and I love when we can call each other by name. It makes us feel a part of our community and seen. I guess my point is people rely on our library being there. I see it every day and I'm happy to be a part of it. So, as I said, libraries change lives and they build community, and ours does an excellent job. Even though, as you all know, we're bursting at the seams and often have to turn folks away because there isn't enough space to gather. So, quickly, just wanted to point out, it doesn't for some reason have my title, but this is going to be a little hard for those of you to see that are further away, but it is a graph. It's listed above are located. These towns have similar library square footage to ours. So the comparison here is the square footage. And what you'll see here is that our square footage is more suited for a town with approximately 3,350 residents, not our current 8,922. The number of Barrington Public Library is more representative of these towns with these population sizes. In order to best serve the residents of Barrington, regardless of having cards or not, it's evident that something needs to change. So a little background, the select board members, thank you all so much for taking the time to send in your questions to all of us. Roger, myself, and the foundation and the trustees worked hard to answer some questions that were asked. So that's what this presentation will be about, simply going to be the answers to the questions that were given to us. So the first question was to provide a copy of our foundation's 2018 IRS form. Did not include that in the slide for all of you. You all received it via email. There is some confidential information on there with people's social security numbers, donor information, so I didn't want to put it up there. Second question is, what portion of our total project budget is in the reserve or contingency? I did just want to point out that our building committee working on the project, myself, trustee chair, Melissa Hewitt, the director of our library, Susan Frankel, the trustee treasurer, Charter Weeks, a community volunteer, Mike Clark, Dan Cassidy, Jason Lacombe, who of S&P Architecture has been working with us since 2008, and Jeff Parks, who's been working with us over the last year from Bowling Construction Management Firm. 10% is the answer of our project budget is in contingency. What is the total amount billed for work by the architects to date, and what portion of that amount is revisions from the project proposed at town meeting in 2019? So $17,300 for adjustments due to removal of the basement. I'm sure many of you remember that first model that we had a large basement. In discussions with the rec department, the rec commission, that was something that was not necessarily a need. So we got rid of that piece of the puzzle, if you will. So we obviously had to pay for those changes. $825 for expenses related to presentations. S&P has been so wonderful. They come along, as I'm sure they should, as the architectures, working with us to our community nights where we've been taking questions and answers. We did 2 last year. We'll do them again this year. And he comes alongside us to do those presentations to answer more in-depth questions. So that totals $18,125, and the answer to what portion of the amount is revised from the project proposed in 19, $0. My last part of the presentation, and then I'll hand it over to Roger. This is number 10, because this was a question that came back after we submitted our answers. So specifically, operating costs, heating, cooling, staff, expanded hours, larger facility, and custodial costs. Obviously, this is a bigger area, so even in the 2020 operating budget isn't expected to increase, it's projected to increase in 2021 once the building is up and running. So heating and cooling. In order to predict this, we went to our architecture firm, and they let us know that in order to predict this with any degree of accuracy, we would need to do a whole building energy model, which is something that we can absolutely do. And what we do know is that the building design is energy efficient, and when it was designed, it would have been only 1/5 of the national average of municipal buildings. It's pretty good. Staff costs, again, this is tricky for us to figure out, but when renovation of our current space happened many years ago, we noticed that our circulation doubled in the first year. So our plan is to track that circulation that first year. If the increase is doubled, obviously we will take that. But we assume that if any increase, what we would just need to do would be to extend a desk clerk's hours. So obviously the desk clerks are doing their job while working with the public. So the shelving sometimes has to get put on the back burner. So if this was to be something that we found to be a problem, Melissa's idea would have been to hire a shelver for a few hours a week that does nothing but that. So they can focus on that piece of the puzzle at a lower rate than per se a full-time employee. And custodial costs. Currently, our custodian is budgeted for 572 hours a year. He or she does work 11 hours a week. The new building, we have decided that at this point, given what we know, we are going to budget for 884 hours a year, so 17 hours a week. So that would be an increase in, 6 hours a week for this person. I believe this is where you begin.
Lindsay, before you walk away,
Sure.
Do you want questions? I think there were some questions that the board had, so do you want to field them now? Or?
I think at the end, that way Roger and I can kind of go together on that, if that's okay with you?
Yep.
Does that work? Okay.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Select Board, for inviting us to this mining operation. we want to assure you that even though the questions you've asked are compelling, that at no point along the way have we been trying to hide anything. So this is a good opportunity for us to divulge all, and that's our intent in doing that. Happy to meet you as the Foundation Board Chair or President. The missions, our bylaws call me a president, and I don't care if I'm just Roger to you, so happy to be there. I'd like to run through the questions that you posed for really the foundation. I've taken over that job as president or chair in April of this year from Tracy Bisson, and she had been running with that for some time ahead of me, and so I'm catching up to a lot of information, and happy to tell you all that I know and have found out, or if I can't answer your question, we'll certainly look for the answer and get back to you. So this particular question focuses on the fundraising stuff that we've done and how that's been applied to the studies that have been done up to the present. So in hiring a consultant for the work of the campaign, that individual was paid for a feasibility study in which 30 households got together, were brought together by her and Marie, and asked about our enthusiasm for the project and support for it and so forth. That part of the study cost that much. The advanced phase was going to a group of prospective donors that were identified as likely supporters, and out of that, a large fraction of what we've raised to date has come in. The community phase then was rolled out to the friends and neighbors down the street, across the road, and so forth, with an anticipated smaller amount to be raised, and the cost of those is identified up there. Got it. So these are funds that are identified as campaign fundraising funds only. Does not include monies that the trustees have put forth to help with the consultant, Sandra Mitchell, from York. Sandy has been a miracle worker for a number of libraries around this area, including Durham and so forth. And so the total comes up to the $145,578. The funding sources that we've put this money to, the architect is paid out of campaign funds, the feasibility study, the advanced phase committee are as identified up there, with in feasibility and community foundation board members stepping up with monies specified for those particular activities. This year, as we roll toward March of 2020, we've agreed as the foundation board to hold our promotional costs to under $5,000. So the total pledged support as of the most recent date that I can get my hands on is $499.77. The commitments for bringing in money is identified there for 19, 20, and 21. And so collected to date plus 248 gives you the $499.77. So we were asked about grants that we'd applied for. 17 grants were applied for. 2 came through. The Opal Charities on top there, formerly known as Wentworth Charities. I tried to go in and find out more about this online. And I can only tell you that they identify educational causes, and they have an interest in a couple of diseases of childhood. The Saul or Sidor grant was a memorial charity started in Bedford, and they focus on education. Not awarded are those grants there. We are putting in for the McKinney grant a second time. It turned out that they wanted material that when it was put in the first time, we really didn't have our ducks lined up for that one, and so it seemed more reasonable to put it in this time. Eversource and New Hampshire Humanities, a mini grant for $1,000 are pending. We went to a number of the larger businesses around who had charitable applications or applications for charitable causes. One responded in the positive, and a number did not respond in the positive. So total grants submitted, 17, and we had awards from 3, and as you can see, 3 are pending, $27,500. Sandy had anticipated for the fundraising campaign that we might get $20,000 in grants, and so we did that and a bit more. So of note, and we'll make this point several times, historically unparalleled fashion, nearly $500,000 has been raised for several purposes. One, to mitigate the tax impact, or to reduce the bond load to the voters of Barrington. And then we also felt that there was kind of a skin in the game notion here, that if we were out asking people to donate, that we as solicitors ought to have donated ourselves. And I think that's been worth something as we've engaged people around the community. Not yet done, Select Board, is to approach the Select Board for access to some unassigned fund balance. That's been done in other communities, Madbury of note, close by. We do this because we've sensed support from the Select Board, and we've also received encouragement from one Select Board individual to actually engage the Select Board in discussions about this money. And that we've decided we're prepared and committed to do. So consider this possibility. And I put this up now knowing that item 7 on the agenda tonight has to do with the unassigned funds. So I'll be showing you some data that I'm sure will be gone over later. So the estimated regular general fund operating expenditure for 2020 is almost $32 million for Barrington. The beginning unassigned fund balance is at 14.5%, or about $4.6 million in change. There are proposals that amount to about $770,000 that will become assigned and be entered onto the voting ballot in 2020, leaving an ending unassigned fund balance at 12.1%. Now, it turns out that back in 2012 and 13, 2 different actions taken at that time, the Select Board set up a guideline for identifying that sweet spot in the fund balance. The state recommends this 8 to 17%, and the Select Board identified 12.5% as being that sweet point. So we thought, well, maybe the Select Board and the Barrington Library Foundation could get together. And so we'd like to propose something very modest, 1.3% of the ending unexpended or unassigned fund balance, $50,000 that might be a point to start negotiations on, start discussions on. That That amount is less than 10%, 1/10 of the allocation that went to the town hall in March of 2019. So the question comes up, and I found this probably to be the most important question to talk about this evening. What's being done to change the mind of those who oppose the proposed new library and community center? And I'd like to walk through some of our thinking with you. We've done what I'm calling, as a prior physician, a post-mortem analysis on this whole process that led up to the vote, and trying to figure out what we could do to prevent the same thing from happening in March of 2020. We've communicated with staff of several New Hampshire town libraries which sought new space but failed in their first attempts to get that money and then succeeded subsequently. We asked them, what were your key strategies and what didn't work for you? None of these considerations has reached the conclusion that gaining a supermajority in 2020 rests with changing the minds of the opponents in any large numbers. Very importantly for us, and I'll say this hopefully a number of times, a significant swing in our approach to the Barrington voter must bear in mind that a majority of voters supported the proposal as it was put forth in 2019. We realize that our supporters are somewhat heterogeneous. There are people who are solid, people I think are gold supporters who've given money and time to help this project along, but there are probably people on the fringe too. And similarly with the opponents, those who oppose the idea, there are folks who are solid and can't be changed come hell or high water, but there might be people on the fringe. And what we don't want to do is to take away something that was supported by our supporters and give it to the opponents and lose the support of some of our supporters. So that is an important notion, and we'll come back to that. Key factors to focus on. One, we think, is the cost of the project. Two is the need for a library community center, a new one. Even a need for a library at all in Barrington, and we've heard those arguments coming at us. And then voter turnout, something that causes me a great deal of impatience, only 31%. And we are trying to do something about that, and I'll tell you some things in just a bit. So the cost, not to be confused with the value. And that value figure has been calculated a number of times and comes in at a bit over $1 million. What that means is that if the library closed down and all of our library users wanted to continue their access to libraries around, they could go to Durham or Rochester or around and spend anywhere from $60 to $200 for a library card, and they would have to purchase what they're getting here for free, valued at over $1 million. And so that's something of, I think, considerable significance. 2020 costs for this library and community center are going to be higher. We all knew that, and we know it now, and guesstimates are in the 7% range. The current plans reviewed against a needs assessment done in 2008 by a professional library individual against the deficits in our current facility size and function, and with the input from our library staff and input from community individuals in discussion groups and singly, that 54% of the vote comes up. All of that's been taken into consideration as we try to focus on the cost issue. So any significant change in the building plan will potentially alienate both those who voted for that plan and those who contributed financially, particularly those who identified spaces or items in the new building that they paid for. They wanted to put money toward that particular thing, like the community room. In short, the foundation trustees feel that more explicit detailing of the cost justification should be done. It's been recommended by a number of people, and we've put up a new frequently answered questions section in our website. And we're going to be focusing on those details in public events that we are planning to hold. And feel like this will be of importance to some Barrington residents. The tax impact, my feeling is the critical cost issue. And so we've amended our website, updated it with a funding section, and the Q&A sections have been redone to try to more explicitly identify that and emphasize that relationship between the assessed value of the property and the tax burden incurred by that individual. And so rather than focus on the median cost of homes here in Barrington, we've taken it down to a table form that they can look at. So that table, I hope, is going to help people see that it does vary by the assessed cost of their home. The middle school bond will be retired October 1, 2022. That is going to give a one-year overlap, and hopefully that will be for some reassurance that the tax impact is going to be somewhat mitigated over the long run. So the myth of convincing individuals who are our opponents has been dealt with, and I would recommend this for the board and anyone. Jonathan Haidt in 2012 wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, and of course all of us think that our mind is right when we look at particular items, and that's what he focuses on. How is it that we can look at the same exact question and come up with diametrically opposed answers to it? And I would strongly encourage you to look at that. He comes to the conclusion that going out and beating up your opponents is not the way to do it. Convincing your opponents is not the way to do it. Eric Klinenberg is a professor of sociology down at NYU, has written this very wonderful book in 2018, Palaces for the People, and I'd encourage you to look at that if you're interested why libraries are important for communities. So, how to do that? How to convince? Always a difficult proposition, and most of the time impossible, and carries with it some inherent risks. Fact-based justifications for the 21st century library has been strongly made, and there's the Klinenberg reference down below. Libraries, and Lindsay made some points about this earlier. Libraries are indispensable for many. Children, I've seen my own grandchildren enter the socialization conveyor belt in Miss Wendy's story time. It also helped Grandpa in those story times meet some people, because we just moved to Barrington, and some of those folks have become long-term acquaintances and friends. Like-minded individuals get together to learn, whether that's to look at the stars at night or permaculture or what have you. Book clubs, recreational activities, and so forth are what libraries have become about, not that that was where they were 25 years ago. So understanding how the public library creates and enhances social capital and infrastructure for the community might help opponents reflect on what their opposition means for themselves, their family members, and their friends and neighbors. That social capital and infrastructure is the stuff that makes a group of people into a functional community, and I think that's what we'd all agree is an important part of being a member of the Barrington community. So messaging. We've got our billboard, and we've heard some ups and downs about that. We have had articles in the local press, and our intent is to continue with that endeavor. We have the online presence with a webpage, Facebook, and MailChimp e-blasts that go out. Periodic foundation letters go out in those particular formats. We have a promotional model that was at the First Seacoast Bank. It then went to the Caleb celebration and now is back in the library. Public education focused events with the PTA and so forth. Planned neighborhood and door-to-door campaigns. And we are in the process of trying to get Marilyn Johnson, who wrote an interesting book I just finished and is in our library, called This Book is Overdue. And it's a rather fun travel through what a library does, what its librarians do and so forth, and their secret lives and so forth. And I think it would be a fun meeting, a fun night to have Marilyn over here. So the turnout. We see it as to energize our supporters and get them to the polls, maybe to convince a neighbor or two, a friend or two. We're constructing an enlarging database, which is now over 400 members strong. Neighborhood support groups are going to be organized. We've divided the town of Barrington into about 12 sectors and are working on that approach. Mailing out prior to the vote, and then Jack Gale back there in the back row has come up with an idea, not his own, but one that has been tried in Vermont and I think Austin, Texas, and so forth, where you get the children involved, the children of the community involved in what this election thing is about. And they look at the animals running for office, and the idea is to teach them something about this election business that we're involved in. But to vote in their election, they have to bring their parents along, and the parents have got to vote before the kids can vote. And so this is an idea that has worked before in getting out the vote. So we have 2020 vision, and this is our model that is now over in the library, and I'll stop there, and we're open to questions.
Dan had his hand up in the beginning. Go ahead.
I got a couple.
All right.
On number 3, the architect, you spent like $18,000 on plans.
Not just on plans, on his time to come to all of our presentations, explaining to the public what he's doing, what our project is about. Excuse me. I believe it says $17,000 there for adjustments to removal of the basement. Oh, there you go.
So you're ready to go to bid with them plans?
We have hired our architecture firm years ago.
No,
Yeah.
but the costs are right there for plans to go up to bid. That's my question.
I don't think I understand the question.
Does he have architectural plans drawn up?
Yes,
So
yes.
Can they go up to bid the plans? Is there extra cost for that?
Oh, we have a construction management firm that's going to handle all of that for us.
No, but you need plans to bid the job.
Right, we have all of the plans.
That seems low, for engineer plans.
That's new.
And then the staff costs,
Mm-hmm,
on future budget, you show a small increase.
mm-hmm.
and you really don't have a true idea until it's built.
I can tell you that we took into consideration that we didn't want to have a giant staff increase when we built this library. So specifically, those architectural plans show that one example would be the way that our circulation desk is being built so that the desk clerks can see the entire library. Had we built it a different way, we may need to have more than one circulation desk. Had we done 2 floors, we would absolutely need to have more staff members so that all eyes were able to be seen everywhere. So purposely, we built this in a way that to start, we won't need any new staff people.
And you could charge for a program fee on certain programs to pay for extra help too, like the rec does.
So the basis of a library is that it is a free space. That is what libraries are built on. Every time we do a program, we always tell folks that this costs people money, it costs our town money. We would love for you to give a donation that you can. Some people throw in a 20, some people throw in $1. We wouldn't, I don't think that's in our philosophy to change that.
All right. And then, two, when you go about the proposal of the town hall, we push that to level funding so it wouldn't be a burden on the taxpayers, so they're paying rent and stuff. And that was my goal, personal goal. And then with the cost of living, there will be a small percentage, but it should be pretty much level funded. And then that's any way you look at this, if you bring out the cost, this will never be level funded. It'll be a total tax burden.
Sure.
And then, have you asked the rec department for a donation from their fund?
I didn't think that we would, I mean, we give presentations to the rec department, we give presentations to the women's club, to the historical society, you name it in town, we've been around. A lot of those people wrote letters of support, some of them were able to give donations. It's my understanding that the rec commission wouldn't expend funds for things other than the rec department. And I may be wrong on that, but in the meetings that I've been to with them, they have made it clear that they have been selected by our residents to commission the rec specifically. So.
I'm just trying to think of the.
Oh, sure, absolutely. We'll take ideas.
Or even the conservation fund. 10%, 75% of the land use tax goes back into that fund. And that their educational stuff too.
So that's something for us to explore, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Tracy?
So I have, and I'll give this to the library group, but I have a few different options for larger funds as far as grant writing that you may be able to approach.
Great.
I think the reflection of 54% of the voters turning out and supporting this project really shows us that our community is very interested in supporting this library. My guess is if we took that 54% of voters and we drilled down to who the family members were that they represent, there's a large portion of our community that represents this. I was struck by a number that you provided because I look at us a little bit like the town of Chester, even though we're bigger in population and certainly bigger in space, but we have a 5% higher amount of people that actually utilize the library than Chester. Chester is a very well-to-do community and certainly a well-educated community, and so that gave me insight as well that we have a more engaged group of residents here that have tie-in to our library, at least 5% more than that community. So that was good to see. I appreciated that you provided us with the expected increase in the shelver hours and the increase in the custodial hours, which I assume is, those are positions that do not pay astronomical rates of pay, so I don't see a huge impact for that. You talked a little bit about the fundraising, which is exciting. I think one of our concerns in asking some of the questions are there's a difference between what's been raised and what's been committed. And we want to be certain that the contingency that we're talking about is not simply to bridge a gap in what the difference between raised, collected,
Sure.
and committed is. So that you need to know, at least my feelings on that are to be certain that what has been pledged is collected and we're not using contingency to make up the difference.
Sure.
That's one thing I'll say.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Yeah, and I can let you know that on that building committee,
Yes.
we continuously talk about that contingency, and how that contingency, we don't want to use that contingency. It is not in our best interest to use that. We have a construction management firm, an architect firm that are letting us know that this is completely doable with this amount of contingency, and hopefully be able to return that right back to the taxpayers. That is not at all in our plan to put that in our pocket and then use it later.
Great.
Yeah.
The 7% increase going with 2020, is that due to materials, tariffs?
Great question. So we reached out to the construction management firm, Jeff Parks, who is the representative that we work with, and asked him simply, if we were to bring back this exact same plan to the community, exactly as it stands, what would the difference be? So what he then did was he took our budgets as they are, he reached out to the subcontractors that he works with, he asked for their rate changes, their material cost, etc. And every one of them, he was able to lay it all out for us. Some were 3%, some were 5%. So that average was a 7% increase. So while it is, quote, a guesstimate, excuse me, I don't know what happened. While it's a guesstimate, it is an accurate one done by someone in the business, not done by us.
Okay, great. And then you spoke a little bit about the donations that people have given, and some of them are earmarked for specific projects.
Yes.
What portion of the almost 500,000 is earmarked for specific projects?
Great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I do know that in discussions around how to change this, if we should change this, oftentimes those real big ticket items like the community room, cut the community room off. Well, that community room is sponsored. So if we cut that community room off, that whatever thousands of dollars is back. We have to give that back. So it was in our best interest to maybe not take any of those big ticket items. Again, that's a great question. If someone from the board could write that down, happy to get that back to you. That's an easy question for our treasurer to answer.
Okay, and then we may see, fingers crossed, a decrease in the bond rate if the debt rate drops, which would be
excellent. Yep.
I specifically spoke to the issue of speaking to your opponents, and when I say that, I don't say you should reach out to everyone that voted no on this project and try and convince them. When I said that, there are things that can be done, and you're doing some of them. Approaching the select board for support, talking about the fund balance. I personally will be bringing forward something later on in the year that talks about the elderly exemption for single elderly, because that was a large group of opponents because they truly cannot afford a tax change.
Yeah.
So when I speak to saying to you, know what your opponents need, I think it's important to be respectful of everyone that is in our town.
Absolutely.
That is affected by all of the choices we make financially. The other side to this that I see is that having a very well-appointed library and a community center for the town of Barrington does nothing for those of us owning homes but increase the value of our community.
Right.
Barrington is very specifically aligned in an area where we are the seacoast, but we're right on the edge of the seacoast.
Right.
We have the land. We're not going to be decreasing our numbers of residents anytime soon. There's nothing that we as a town could ever do to make that happen. There's too much land here. So we're going to be the community that people move to. And I think being mindful of that and planning for our future does become important, at the same time being fiscally responsible. So I appreciate all of the information that you provided. My only question will be, what is your contingency or backup plan should you not be able to collect your committed dollars?
And I think, well, quickly going back to that first part about our opponents, the trustees, a bunch of us went to the state conference this year, and we learned a lot about that and how to do that. There were quite a few people who reached out to some of us on the board literally the night before the vote and said, could you come over to this bonfire and talk to us about this? We have some questions. And obviously that was unable to be done the night before the vote. But reaching back out to those people, making those small group meetings, really engaging with folks on what exactly are the concerns and how can we help. And I think that what you're stating about letting people know, because we fully understand, and I will speak for all of us, that a tax burden to anyone is something. And I fully understand the mindset that some people absolutely don't have another nickel to put towards that. And we are not trying to diminish that at all. So researching, working with you, working with others on how to bridge that gap for those folks through services, taking that social work approach, we're absolutely on par for that. That is a goal for us. And I already forgot with the contingency. I think that the building committee, again, is very, very committed to, and we talk about this in our meetings, that we're building this project and we're building this space, and we've talked about other ideas that we could do this instead of this or do that instead of this, and the problem we keep coming back to is that quality, and we don't want to build something that is going to not be efficient in a few years. With that said, we're also realistic in the sense that if that were to happen, obviously those cosmetic things would be out the window. The cabinets, we wouldn't get the we have lists done on those things that aren't as important to get the doors open.
So what's the total amount of that list if we had to cut portions of that?
Well, that's pretty tricky because, again, we made that list and now we need to figure out what things are earmarked.
Okay.
So this is, with everything coming earlier this year, this has been a tricky dance to get because the architects in the building, people are, oh, you have a few more weeks. No, we need this stuff now. So we're definitely working towards that. But again, coming back to, we don't want to get rid of things that has been identified as a need and a desire for those that are supportive. We don't want to alienate any of those 54% by taking out something that they were really excited about.
Good.
A
Okay.
for example on that last one is that if you took out the security doors that allow the the community room to be used after hours without library people to be there, if you took those out, you might save several tens of thousands of dollars.
But you defeat the purpose.
But you defeat the purpose. So there are, yeah. So I wanted to ask in response to something you said and things that I've heard at select board meetings before. When you say that you've heard this said in the community, how are we to take that? Is that one person? Is that a metric that says if it's one, then it must be 10%? How do we understand?
We value that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which portion of what I said you're speaking to.
Well, so in particular, the elderly exempt. So I heard that stated at the deliberative session.
Yeah.
I wonder what that means when we hear a person come up. Is that a reference to a certain number that professionally you guys are trained to understand? When you hear it once, it's 10% or what?
No, so what it meant to me was listening to those residents of the town that are living on fixed income and then going back, and what we did as a select board is we reviewed in comparison to the rest of the state what our elderly exemption looked like, along with all of our exemptions, but we were able to identify that our exemptions actually have a lot more depth to them and are more impactful than most other municipalities in the state of New Hampshire, with the exception of one category. And again, this is my opinion of identifying that category, not the select board's opinion, and that was single elderly.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
So that was where that information and my discussion of that came from.
Go ahead, Dan.
I have a lot of people talk to me, and so there's a lot of people in town that have a fixed income, and stuff. That's all they got. They have to make
Understood?
a decision, do we eat and stuff, and then make and stuff. And then that's why
we understand that, 100%. I mean, I grew up in a situation that I was that fixed income, I was on welfare, all of those things. We all understand that. We are not taking this lightly at all. That is in the forefront of all of our minds. That's why we're sitting down and saying, well, if we get rid of this entire partition, maybe we'll save $30,000, but then we have to give it back because someone actually donated that. So we are looking at those things. We're trying to get this down as, and we did make changes. We did. We value engineered last year. Everybody knows that we started at an over $5 million bond. Everyone knows that. We got it down to 3.9. So we did that. Not to say that there isn't still room, but I just want it to be known because for some reason it feels to us that folks think that we are taking monies lightly, and that is not at all the case.
And then on the contingency,
Yep.
I've done a lot of jobs and
Mhm.
and the architects and different things, it always gets tapped into. You don't have to save it. There's always something that comes out.
The good news is that our foundation is totally committed to continue to fundraise, and if we get that $10,000 and we hit our 500, we're not packing up our boots and going home. We're still fundraising. So if we can continue to do this, we've had numerous people tell us, once you hit that 500 mark, you get my donation. So that continual fundraising will offset those costs, that bond inversion. Again, we are completely committed to doing without on certain things if we can get the space that we need.
General feedback, things that I see that, based on my conversations with folks around the community, that tend to kind of repel people away rather than pull them in. So when we talk about visits, we talk about the fact that we have more visits than like any other library. And actually a couple of staunch library supporters that I know said, even I'll acknowledge I question the visit count, which I know is the ticker as you come through the door.
Okay.
So 46,000 visits being the commentary on it with what, approximately 3,800 card holders, which if you break it out averages out to about 12 visits a year, so one visit a month, which doesn't seem unrealistic, but it's one visit a month from every card holder, and not
Sure, but when I enter the library, I enter with 4 children who are not card holders, and they don't get counted in that beep.
Absolutely.
So,
They don't get counted in the beep.
I mean, I think I get counted in the beep.
Yeah, they get.
No, they all get counted in the beep? Okay. But they're not, I guess I'm confused because you said library card holders, as in none of those little kids are library card holders.
I understand,
Yeah.
but the visits all count toward the library card
Okay.
holders. So that's what I'm saying, is those are the things that people will call into question or
Okay.
will nitpick at.
Sure.
So if you can better break that out.
Okay.
So if you look at 3,800 library cards, what's the actual utilization of your 3,800 library holders? And then when you look at your visits, how, you want to factor in, okay, this is what we estimate our visits at based on our circulation usage. Those are things that really will help take some of your fence sitters and pull them over
Sure.
for you. The other piece is, one of the things that you mentioned as a concern was pushing away somebody who may have made a donation. And at the end of the day, it is a hard decision, but sometimes a $2,000, a $5,000 donation for a $100,000 portion or $200,000 portion is just not worth the donation.
Sure, we're talking big donations. We're talking $30,000 donation for something that's a large donation. But and again, when we made that list, while some people are like, oh, don't cut that, it's only 2,000. Those 2,000, 4 of those add up. So that is absolutely in the forefront of our mind. Definitely weighing that.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to make sure is
Yeah.
that you're thinking about what is the actual impact cost versus the donation
Sure.
cost.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to see is a Homer Simpson card at the end of this. Anybody that's seen it
I don't
knows
get
by
that.
reference. Anyway, Homer Simpson designs a card. It has like every gadget device you can have it, to the point where nobody would ever buy it.
Right. That is definitely not what we're doing. Not at all.
So there was that. The information around the feasibility study, the advanced phases, I think that is all good information, and the increased cost, being able to better make sure people understand that we're estimating a 7% increase in building costs based on just
material, labor, et cetera, yeah.
Growths in there. I think the more you can get out around the pledged amounts and the grants, and any resources and help I think anybody has toward grants is a great thing. I think it's great that you showed that, we have 2 awarded grants, 1 business application donation that was in there, and then what's still pending and that out there. That's great for us to see. I think it's also great for the community to see. And then my other note that I had on it was, there was a general comment, and me just being critical of things. You talked about the cost of losing the library at like $1 million a person. I don't know how you
explain that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure, there's a website. There's a tool that we use on our website. So when I, as a patron, walk in and I go up with my 14 books and I check in, on the bottom of my receipt, it lets me know that I just saved blah, blah, blah amount of money. Had we not had a library and I had to go to a bookstore and buy those books, or I had to go to Amazon and buy those books, or I had to enroll my child in a movement class because we don't have a sensory movement class here, which we do, but if we didn't have a library and I had to enroll my child in that, and I don't even know if programming cost is in that, but I do know that if you look on our website, that number is always changing and it's always going up. And we've used this tool for a couple years now, and it is very evident that obviously the monetary value, it does seem very high, but I mean, a hardcover book is $17, so it adds up real quick.
Just from the standpoint of how can, whether it's we as a select board, help make that more visible, or how do you folks make that more visible? Because I wouldn't know that without having this conversation. From my standpoint, I just look at it like, okay, I took the 3,800 members divided by the high end of the $200 for a library card in another community that we talked about, because I know I have a Dover one. And, it was $760,000. I'm like, okay, where's the other $250,000 coming from?
Yep.
So how do we publicize that?
Sure.
Here's how that's calculated and here's what it
Great.
costs.
Roger's writing all of these notes down.
Tax impact, I think that is a big thing. I look forward to seeing the table that you said is posted. And I know a lot of other people do as well.
And we will work that into all of our community presentations. Yep.
And I know the middle school bonds paid off in 2022, but it kind of is an aside on that. The entire cost of what that bond is gets eaten up every year by just the increased, the budget increase for them. It more than blows away whatever savings comes out of that. Yeah, from the school budget. I appreciate the reference. I'm actually going to look up the righteous mind, so thank you for that. And then the messaging. I know you guys said you've had some feedback on it. I know I have had some feedback on it where people were a little put off by some of the messaging that's been out there as well, particularly around some of the signs that were posted down around the corner, but I know we had some sidebar conversations about some of that as well.
Yeah, Roger did his beyond due diligence to make sure that we were complying with all laws, and him and Connor worked really hard together to figure that out. I think that the end result is that no matter what we do, we're not going to please everybody, and we stand behind our messaging. We're really proud of the work we've done. I'm extremely proud to be part of this movement that's come into our town. I love Barrington. I am so happy to be here and to work with all of these people. They work full-time jobs, they have families, and they're coming out night after night, knocking on doors. This is incredible, and it is a movement, and we're doing our best. And I hope that the majority of the people do appreciate what we're doing.
Dawn,
Anything else?
I was just going to say, Dawn, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think she made an excellent presentation. And she
Thank you.
certainly has given herself a basis to make another one.
Tracy?
Are you looking for a commitment tonight from the select board on the 1.3% of the fund balance so that we can bring that? Now, it's my understanding that has to be voted on as well in conjunction with the library bond, correct?
So that would certainly have to be a separate article. So the bond council, who the library worked with last year, is very particular about the wording of a bond request article. And so you don't fit anything else into that bond request, like additional funding sources from the town. So that would have to be a separate warrant article. It would be structured not dissimilar to warrant articles for contributions to capital reserves. In this case, I might not necessarily suggest setting up a capital reserve, but maybe a non-lapsing fund or something like that. But it would be a separate warrant article.
And will we have a better picture as we approach budgeting and we're creating these warrant articles to know what the actual balance will be at year end of that fund?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, and so, you know, we can talk about this more with the board later, but to be clear to the community and certainly to the board, all the information that the library folks use gathering those numbers is available on the website. It's linked in the report for this meeting, and I think that's really important because it's kind of a difficult thing to gloss over in a brief presentation or even in the time that we'll spend with it tonight. And so I made every effort to make as much information available as possible with dialogue. And so the one thing a little bit different than how Mr. Gingrich presented it, so the projected numbers I think tell less of a story. It's still an important story to have as part of the entire conversation. But the projected numbers tell less of a story than the actual numbers. So the 31 million of estimated regular general fund operating expenditures. That number increases every year. I took a 12-year average, I think, of what that increase was to project out to the next year. This year it's much more than average because the school had significant increases in the operating budget. So we don't know what it's going to be next year, but the other assumption that was made for the beginning 2020 unassigned fund balance, that $4.6 million number, so that necessarily takes into account what is added to fund balance at the end of this year. And so that's a number that we certainly won't know. I used an estimate over the same 12-year period to estimate that approximately $600,000 was added to fund balance every year. Now you'll see the $770,000, that's what the board is anticipated to propose used from fund balance. So if 770 comes out at town meeting and 628 goes in, you're inherently dropping, and it hasn't always been that way. But if you go back and look at what's been contributed to unassigned fund balance year over year, you'll see that it does vary significantly from $1.4 million one year to $2,000 another year. And so those numbers are provided as projections because we have to estimate, we have to try to understand where we're going to be. But to your point, Tracy, about are we going to have a clearer picture? So we will have a clearer picture after the tax rate is set, for example. So October, November timeframe, we'll have a clearer picture of our unassigned fund balance, after the values have been changed and things like that. And then we'll be able to estimate, obviously, as you know, as we go through the budget process, we have department heads put together what their estimated year-end expenditures are. So that starts to give us a clearer and clearer picture throughout the end of the year of how much will be contributed back to fund balance from appropriations. The revenue estimate is more difficult to know until after year-end. But the picture will get clearer and clearer on those estimates as year-end approaches, absolutely. I wanted to ask one question if I could, and I'll direct it to you first, Melissa. The warrant article request form that you submitted, are those real numbers, or is that just based on the 7%?
7%.
Okay. And so, the board will talk about this as we go through the budget process. So obviously, not only budget numbers, but warrant article requests change throughout the process. Certainly, these numbers are put together based on that 7% increase. But right now, what is requested of the board, which again, we'll talk about through the process, is a total project cost of $4,734,000 and change. With this shows the 404 raised by the foundation, 404,000, with an estimated bond cost of $4,330,128.32. And so I think and obviously, like I said, my understanding is those are estimates based on 7% increase.
Right.
Those numbers will become clearer as we get farther. But I think, talking about the most up-to-date numbers is important. And one of the things, and Tracy, I think you asked a question earlier that alluded to this. So the difference between collected and committed funds, so if we use in the warrant article request, which is what was used last year, but if we use committed funds and not collected funds, in the event, so on the back end for budgeting and tax rate setting, we offset whatever's in that warrant article as fundraising funds. That comes right out and says this is coming from a separate source. And so any of that money that doesn't come in impacts what has to be used. And so I think the point Tracy was making is if, we'll just talk around numbers, if 500,000 is committed and that's put in the warrant article request, and then $400,000 is collected, that $100,000 can't come from the bond because it wasn't appropriated by the voters. And so it would likely either come from the contingency or concessions of $100,000 would need to be made. And so I think the select board, working with the library and the request for the bond, will have to have a thoughtful conversation about what number to use. Whether it's the committed number or the collected number. Because both would have implications. Obviously, one implication for using collected number is that doesn't tell the whole picture of how much support the library has.
Exactly.
Using the committed number, the risk that runs is if it isn't all collected, is fundraising, there is a portion that won't be collected. Then that money will have to come from somewhere, or concessions will have to be made in the project to make up the difference.
Right.
So I think that's an important, thoughtful conversation to have. I think Tracy was trying to get at it earlier. Doesn't have to be had tonight, doesn't have to be settled tonight, but to be thinking about as we move forward.
And and I may be completely wrong on this, so if I am, Melissa, please jump in, but I saw a lot of heads make a face, because you mentioned the number, it's not in front of me, is 404, the committed fundraising. When we raised 490, so that is our treasurer looking at when that, do you want to explain it?
Sure.
I'm like looking at her chomping at the bit. She's better at it.
Hi, I'm Melissa Hewitt, the director of the Barrington Library. The number that was put in that warrant article request is what we forecasted October 1st as of next year as our groundbreaking day. So that would be what we would have in our hands to spend as of October 1st, 2020.
So still committed funds,
Still committed funds,
anticipated collected by that time.
It's
But not showing all of what was committed, because we aren't, because we are trying to be mindful of that. Because we could put 490 in there, but that's not as true of a picture as what we'll have the day they break ground. Well, yes, you're right, absolutely. Someone could say, I pledged this money and a hardship has happened and now I don't have that. And again, I think I'd speak for us all, and that we would be committed then to make concessions as opposed to tapping into that contingency.
Sure.
That's a great point. Anything else?
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Mr. Town, would you get that light switch right above your head? Oh, wrong one, yeah. Yeah, no, perfect. You take your
Right. Public comment, just a reminder, that public comment is 15 minutes and 3 minutes per person. Going once.
Hello again, I'm Melissa Hewitt again, the director of the library, hasn't changed. One thing I wanted to let you know about, Andy, is if you go on our catalogs homepage, on the desktop view, not your mobile view, but if you're on your computer and were to look up, on the upper right-hand corner, there's a widget that's built into our software that we purchased that gives the year-to-date savings, and right now it's like $790,000 in change from year-to-date, so this time through last year is what our patrons have saved by coming to the library. And that just is the basic metrics of what we use for our pricing and that sort of thing. But I also wanted to let everyone know that September is Library Card Sign-Up Month, and we are in a friendly little competition with other state libraries, trying to get our trophy back that we had won for 2 years in a row and lost sadly last year. I believe it was the Seabrook, where it's some equation that they use. But I wanted to just invite everybody to come and visit our space and come see what we have going on and get a library card to start checking out some of the books mentioned in the presentation tonight, take advantage of some classes and presentations that are coming. We are doing a couple of things differently this fall. we are trying to, me being a working mom and can't do some of these fun things at the library with my kids, we're trying to do an afternoon, early evening story time for parents. That's going to be Mondays at 4. We have our regular reread sessions starting next week as well. That's the 10:30 time, our drop-in story time. And then we're also doing a sensory play at 10:30s on Fridays for the next, I believe, 8 weeks. So kids can come 6 months to 36 months, come play, get messy, and mom and dad don't have to clean up the mess. Grandma and grandpa don't either. We have a really interesting loon presentation coming up with someone from the Loon Preservation Commission, and that's the 19th. We've been offering chair yoga the third Tuesday of every month. It's switching to 2:30 this month, just to accommodate our new fall schedule. And we also have a phenomenal art display up this month from an organization whose world headquarters is in Newmarket. It's called Child Voice, and it's all about these war-torn, horrible situations over in Africa, I believe it is, and they are just training these women to be more industrious and little entrepreneurs. And one of the representatives from this organization is coming on the 26th, which is a Thursday at 5:30, to give a presentation about the art that's coming up and that sort of thing. But I encourage you guys to come get your library cards if you don't have one. Just come check out the space, and also check our calendar of what's coming up too for some other interesting events. Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to pass out these grants to somebody in the library.
Oh, got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, just for the record, my name is Matt Town, I'm a resident of Barrington. I also happen to be your legislature at General Court. Just one quick comment. For all the discussion that has to happen regarding the finances and the need, the design, that's all good. At some point we have to pass beyond that. And that is, we have to come together, and I'm specifically addressing this to the select board, that we have to get behind this. Either yes or no, but not be fractured about our approach. So when you decide that this is a going project, please come out strongly and vocally in favor of this project. That's certainly what I would advocate. The same way you did with the town hall. There wasn't daylight between any of you about the town hall. There shouldn't be daylight about the library between any of you either. That's my point.
Any other public comments? All right. Moving into staff reports.
Review the minutes.
Oh, minutes first. Yes.
And I will just make the comment publicly for the record and for this video, which is very likely still working. So the last meeting, unfortunately, it disappoints me to report that our video was cut short at 12 minutes. We made an effort to try to record the police department presentation, and no good deed goes unpunished, and that caused the system to stop recording. So for anybody that's watching this video, missed last meeting on August 26th, I apologize. Please do review the minutes. That information is available. I want to give special thanks to Tiffany, who had to work a little extra harder this time putting those minutes together with no video to review, but she takes excellent notes, and she did an awesome job. So sorry again for not having a video, but the minutes are awesome and you should check them out.
Thank you, Tiffany. Motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes from the August 26th meeting.
Motion.
Article 5?
Yeah, bye.
Good
Let's try
minutes.
this time again. A staff report.
Sure thing. So the information that I had to present, obviously we talked briefly about the unassigned fund balance. So I'm happy to spend some time now talking about it, or I can answer questions from the board. Again, I will just make it clear to the community that this information is available on the town's website. Anybody that's interested in some of the more detailed financial information for the town, I definitely encourage you to look into it, ask questions. My contact information is on most of the documents, and I'm happy to discuss it further. I don't want to take up more of the board's time than necessary, so I'm glad to just answer questions if you'd like.
It was very detailed, thank you.
I think until we get farther along in this, right now it's just good background information. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Good. Okay, Dan, do you have anything you'd like to comment on?
not at this moment.
Yeah, so I'll say, I think the headline of where the town's been at in the fund balance, so the documents talk about the importance for cash flow and financial stability, but one of the headlines, I think, is where the town has been with the fund balance and where we are now. So certainly building up from 11.8% in 2012 as a percentage of those operating fund expenditures to over 17% at the time of voting last year. That was something that took many years to accumulate. It was good financial practice, but also reflected the community's lack of support for certain efforts that did ask to use fund balance. So it wasn't just that money accumulated year over year. The select board tried to spend it, $750,000 in 2018, and only the voters can use this money. Only the voters can say appropriate this money for anything. The select board can certainly develop it into a warrant article, but it's not the select board's decision to make, it's the voters' decision to make. And so it took a number of years to get there, and the voters supporting the $1,025,000 of fund balance towards the town hall brought that fund balance to a much more responsible place for the town at just under 12.5%. And as we use fund balance to fund the priorities of the town at the 2020 town meeting, that will likely, is estimated to reduce that fund balance even further to just over 12%. Again, a much more responsible, it's not as financially irresponsible to have more fund balance than is recommended, but it isn't necessarily the best case scenario to hold taxpayer monies in that way, giving them an opportunity to spend it and fund the priorities that they see fit. So I'll leave it at that. The other piece of information that I wanted to make the select board aware of, as I have done in previous situations, so the police chief has the authority to issue a waiver to the parking ordinance upon request and review of safety. So the police chief has issued a parking ordinance waiver for 37 Brooks Road on September 28th, following a safety audit recommendations to the property owners. I also want to draw the board's attention to September work anniversaries. This month, Amy Inglis, who is of course the former library director for a number of years, now is a interlibrary loan librarian, celebrating 23 years in the town of Barrington. Dana Drake is a member of the highway department crew, celebrating 19 years in the town of Barrington. Barbara Irvine, who's the land use administrative assistant, celebrating 16 years in the town of Barrington. Deborah Tatum, who's the recreation custodian, has been here 11 years. James Sanger, the friendly face that greets everybody at the recycling compactors at the transfer station, has been here for 4 years. And John Thomas Harmon, firefighter and EMT, has been with the town of Barrington for 2 years. So congratulations to all of them. All of the other materials are throughout the agenda, under agenda items.
Dan?
Thank you, that's a power thing, having a resident come there and do the proper thing on the parking thing. This gives the neighbors a heads up and stuff. We have narrow roads and stuff. It's a pain to do, but it should be done.
As the property owner at 37 Brooks Road, I found the process to be very smooth and the chief to be very pleasant to work with.
Thank you for being a power example.
Let's say that guy in Brooks Road was the heck of a guy.
Yeah, real winner.
The municipal office administrators.
That would be Tiffany's report.
For your signature, I have a payroll manifest for pay period ending 9/1/2019, accounts payable manifest 201972 dated 9/4/2019, and a raffle permit request from 2A Tactical LLC, Veterans Count, Warriors at 45 North. That's all.
Alrighty. All right, old business. Second reading of the town facilities camera policy. Tracy?
Did we update that to, because we had talked about the body cameras, did we update the town facility camera policy? to think or include any of that?
We updated it to reflect all of the changes recommended by the select board at the August 26th meeting. We also presented this to the town's council for review and made minor grammatical revisions based on her recommendation.
So everybody is happy with it, the way it's worded and written?
That's your decision to make. I'm happy with it based on the changes recommended and the advice of council.
How would the board like to proceed?
I'd make a motion to accept the town facility camera policy as is drafted with the approval of our legal department.
I will second that.
There are.
Cat Joy?
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. Moving on from there, the in-house paramedic transportation second reading.
So there are no changes recommended by the select board at the August 26th meeting. This is the planned second reading for board review and consideration for approval.
So based on the presentation that we received, it seems to me to be appropriate for us to utilize our in-house paramedics for the transports when it is within the guidelines of the definition of the policy. Any other discussion, you know, if there is no other discussion, I would be ready to make a motion to accept it.
Dan, commentary?
I think we might be talking about this later, about the collection program and stuff. I don't want to see it be an impact to the budget because we're looking, I don't think it's going to be, but just for show the public, the library, we're trying to work it all out so we don't impact the budget. So we're trying to work to deal to see how easy I am.
Is there anything you would like that?
Just to show that it would not be, the purpose of this policy, there would not be an impact to the budget. If we have an in-house paramedic available, they'd be paid out of the fund. So by them coming out, my recommendation is that they're paid $100. The lowest service coming out for paramedic intercept is $175, and it goes up to $400. So again, the reason for this policy is to, if our people come out and do it, we'll save at least a minimum of $75 and upwards of $300.
Thank you.
Chief, could you explain to us the average length of a transport in time?
Average length of transport is between an hour and a half and 2 hours.
And your proposal is at $50 per hour for a paramedic?
Yep. Again, you're paying for the skill set, and if we're not always going to be able to benefit by this. I have 2 in-house paramedics. They're not available all the time, but the idea of putting this policy together is that we would save money if they were able to come out and cover the transport.
Would it be palatable to you if we got our compensation study back and utilized the recommended rate times 2 hours for the compensation for this?
You folks have the ability to set it at anything you want. The idea is if the compensation study comes back at a low rate and they choose not to come out and respond, then we're going to pay the outside agency to do it. So again, this is an incentive to get, they're highly skilled in life-saving, and again, I put this policy together in an effort to save the town money. If you come back with a compensation study that says they should be paid at $22 an hour, and that's what you're going to do, you're within your right to do that. They're within their right not to come out and respond, so we won't save the money. It's pretty simple.
I hear you. I think that it's appropriate for us to know what the average amount of time is for the response, factor in the travel within
Again,
12 miles you indicated and use an appropriate rate as recommended.
You're paying for a skill set. It's not the fact that you're paying for them for how long they're tied up. You're paying for their skill set. Paramedics go to school for a long time to achieve the skill sets they need to provide the medical services out in the field to the patients. So it's not, if we bring Frisbee in, and I'll use Frisbee as an example, it's $175 for them paramedics to provide that care to us. Either way, we're going to pay that. Whether the patient has insurance or not, we'll get billed for $175. If McGregor comes out and does it, it's $200. If the city of Dover does it, it's $400. So I'm merely presenting a proposal to you that says, if we have in-town, in-house paramedics that are willing to come out when they're not scheduled to be on duty, the town saves money. If you want to offer them $22 or $25 an hour, I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to come out and do it. So we're going to pay Frisbee, McGregor, or the city of Dover. So this is strictly a cost-saving measure.
Just for my own knowledge here, when they come out, they bill Barrington for that?
Yes.
So not the person receiving
Nope.
the transport?
We've asked for the service, so we get the bill. If the patient has insurance, we bill the insurance company, so in effect, we get some of that money back. But if a patient doesn't have insurance, then we're paying.
Right, and then also, just something that I try to be mindful of is, yes, they're sending transport out, but they're also, it's their own ambulance, their own... No. We're providing the transport. We're paying for their services. When you say we're providing the transport...
We are. They come out with a truck. The medic is in the truck. He jumps in our ambulance and he provides patient care to the hospital. One of us drives their truck back to the hospital.
Okay, that's why I'm asking these questions.
Yep.
Dan?
And I'm not the smartest person. For comprehending this, I think you can't really go by the time, hour and a half to 2 hours. Because if people are, if they're there already, you don't get, if we're not paying by the hour, I think it's cheaper in the long run. They're putting more than hour and a half, 2 hours in.
In the state of New Hampshire, if an employee reports to work, they're paid a 2 hour minimum.
Right.
No, I'm just saying that I don't think they're gonna we set the rate. I don't think we're gonna get 2 hours, 15 minutes, whatever. A little extra time, I don't think we'll get billed.
And are you targeting one paramedic or two paramedics to respond?
One. The policy says there are times when we have had a paramedic on and we have brought an outside paramedic in because the care for the patient requires the skill sets of multiple paramedics. The vast majority of the time, we're only requiring one, but the policy is written in such a way that if we needed another medic, that they'd be authorized to come in. I would say this, that the need for a second paramedic for a critically ill patient would be minimal. But again, this policy, view it for what it is. It ultimately is designed to save the town of Barrington money. That's all it is. It's really not about, you shouldn't really be looking at what you perceive we're paying somebody by the hour to come out and do this. You should be looking at it for what it was designed to do. It's saving the town money. Every time, if you approve this policy, any time that we can use an in-house paramedic and avoid bringing an outside service in, we're going to save money.
Tracy?
It appears to me if we were paying $175 to the Frisbee healthcare system for paramedic transport.
It's not the transport, it's an intercept.
Okay, the intercept, then if it is a patient that is uninsured and cannot make the payment, that Frisbee is still billing us?
Absolutely.
The $175. I see the cost savings in this, and I certainly understand what it is that you're going for, especially with the new intercept enforcement of what's happening out there. Some of the concern that I would have is if you're reimbursing at a rate of $50 per hour of incident, and the average incident or response is for 2 hours, and then the other work that you're utilizing a firefighter / paramedic for is paid at a significantly less rate of pay.
We don't have a firefighter paramedic on staff.
But we could, correct?
It's highly unlikely that a firefighter paramedic would come to work for the town of Barrington.
Okay.
We don't have the call volume to dictate the skill sets that a paramedic needs and wants to use. And quite honestly, with what the town of Barrington pays for firefighters, we're lucky to get what we're getting. You wouldn't get a paramedic to even apply here with what you folks are paying.
How many paramedics do you have on staff?
2.
2. And do they work for other agencies full-time?
Yes,
So their availability would be...
limited. Again, you know, I said that right from the beginning, that they're not, it's not like they're gonna make 6 calls a week or 10 calls a week. This is strictly a cost-saving measure. And the policy is clear that you folks can set the rate. It says right in the policy that you 5 people get to set the rate. And again, I will just say this in the conversation I've had with the 2 paramedics we have on staff. You know, if it's not worth their while, they won't come out. They'll just, we can wait the 10 or 12 minutes for Frisbee or McGregor or Dover, and it is what it is. So, I mean, I don't know how to be any more blunt than I am. This is a cost-saving measure that I put together. It's strictly a cost-saving measure. Don't look at what we're paying somebody for their service. We're paying for the skill sets, whether they're coming out of Frisbee, they're coming out of McGregor, they're coming out of our own house. And because they're coming out of our own house, you shouldn't expect that we get a discount rate.
Don?
Does the town have the right to ask if someone has insurance and...
No, as a matter of fact, we have people that have indicated to us that we don't want to use your services because we can't afford to pay them, and that becomes very disheartening to us. And we work really hard to make sure that the people understand that this isn't about the money and whether or not they're going to get billed. This is really about the services they need because they called us and they need our help and need to go to the hospital.
When we're referring to Frisbee, I think they're not gonna go down the price, they're gonna go up because they're private now.
I don't see that.
No, they're not, didn't they just get bought out of that private organization?
They're moving to an HCA merger.
But I don't see that.
Yeah, so that price is not gonna go down, it's gonna go up.
I don't see that happening. It could, but again,
Does making this change, Chief, affect our relationship with any of the intercepting medical facilities?
nope, as a matter of fact, it would probably help because everybody's so busy that anytime we could pick up one of our own and not bring their services out. One of the things that you see, and I'm going to get off track a little bit, is we work very hard to color outside the box. There are times, I'll just use for an example, there are times when the medic truck isn't available and we ask for a paramedic intercept from the city of Rochester. They come out in a full ambulance, and if that patient is going to be transported to the city of Rochester and we can wait long enough, we'll put that patient in Frisbee's ambulance so we're not taking 2 ambulances out of service. If we have to load the patient and our ambulance get moving and meet them on the road, or the patient wants to go to a different destination or needs to go to a different destination, then we'll try to split our crew and put one of our people with Frisbee and go back to the city so that we're not taking 2 ambulances out of service, because I do understand that, you know, everybody's busy. McGregor goes into the city of Dover on a regular basis because Dover is busy, and Frisbee runs 3 buses all the time, and they're busy, and McGregor's gonna get busier, not only because of all the college kids and stuff, but there's a rather large retirement home gonna open up over there that will certainly have an impact on that. So the point is, all the ambulance services are getting busier by the day, whether they're fire-based or private-based. We're all getting busier, but we're not necessarily adding ambulances, so we have to be a little bit more creative in how we're providing the services in the area to make sure that we're, in some cases, helping each other cover all the bases. I might just recommend, I think it makes sense to do $100, but, if you, again, I view it as shortchanging the people, because when the paramedic from Frisbee comes in, or McGregor at $200, you're paying $100 an hour for that patient, for that person. Why you wouldn't want to pay our people $50, I don't understand, but at any rate, the policy is clear that the 5 of you, and by state law, you set the rates, so you 5 people get to decide what you think you should pay your in-house paramedics to provide this service.
I understand what you're saying. The only thing that I struggle with a little on that is that you're making it out like we're actually paying the paramedic from Frisbee.
We are.
$175. We're paying
Well,
$175.
The paramedic is making
Right.
Okay.
$22 to $28 an hour.
Okay, but we're paying Frisbee almost $100 an hour for that service. So if we stand here and say that we're agreeable that we'll pay Frisbee for that service, or McGregor for that service, I'm offering to have our people do it for half the price.
I'm agreeable to the policy, not necessarily to a rate at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to get the comp study back, Chief.
The problem with this comp study is that, everything we've done, I worked hard to try to provide adequate services and try to hang on to the people I got. I've made numerous comments to you folks about how tough it is to hire people, and that we should work to keep what we got. I presented money in my budget to do that last year, and again, if the compensation study comes back and says pay them $25 an hour, and you come back at $25 an hour, I'll just go on a limb right now and say that our people won't come out very much. I hate to be this blunt, but,
I appreciate you being this blunt. My response is that I understand what you're saying. I also think that we need to look at the comp study, and if it says that the maximum in range is $32.50 an hour, then we sit and say, okay, at a 2-hour minimum, $32.50 an hour, 65, and then the actual response time to get to the bus, as you call it, the ambulance, is another half an hour, and that brings us up to 80. I just think there needs to be methodology, not just, let's throw a dart on this and we'll save money. I would like to look at the...
Where's your other half hour coming from? I guess you're losing me.
You say that the response time has to be within 5 minutes of dispatch and 10 minutes arrival on scene. So 15 minutes. I am assuming that the person has to report from their home to the station.
No.
Get the ambulance?
They have to be on scene that much.
Okay, 15 minutes of travel time, 15 minutes back home, I assume, is what I was going with.
See, the 15-minute time frame is based on roughly the amount of time from a paramedic being dispatched out of mutual aid to some place in Barrington is going to run on the short end 8 minutes, on the high end 15. So that's why, in effect, the ability for the 2 in-house paramedics to respond from their home, if they were available and were going to make the call, they would probably, in all reality sign on within a minute or two and arrive on scene in town somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes. The point behind that policy is that while I don't believe it would happen, you don't want a paramedic to be in downtown Rochester or in some other community and go, I'm gonna go cover that call and take 20 minutes to get into town, because that defeats the purpose of the medic. So,
Right, you don't want them in Dover and then
correct.
driving back.
Correct, so that's why you're seeing that thing in the policy about putting a time on there, and it also says in there that if we started an outside agency and they're on their way, then our in-house paramedic is out of luck, because I won't cancel the out-of-town medic. Again, I would encourage you to approve the policy, and again, the whole idea behind this policy is to save the town some money and provide an incentive for our paramedics to come out and do this. And I will just say this, if you put a rate in there of $30 to $32 an hour or whatever based on what the compensation study says, then I don't see this policy going anywhere. I really don't. It is what it is. At the very least, I would encourage you to, let me go back to them and see if they'll get out of bed for 75 bucks. The problem...
Rick, hang on one second. Tracy, go ahead. Oh, or Dan first, then Tracy, sorry.
Well, to clarify in my mind, we're not paying, McGregor's paying somewhere 8, 10 hours shift or whatever, sit there. That's at that rate. We're not paying these people. We're only paying them the 2 hours to cover that call. So it's cheaper to me than paying somebody hours.
You're not even paying an hourly rate, you're paying a flat fee.
Right.
It's a stipend for them to come out and cover this. It's not a flat fee. I mean, it's not an hourly rate, it's a flat fee.
Right, I agree with it, because we're not paying 8 hours, 8 or 10 hours, or a shift is.
Go ahead, Tracy.
So I believe in methodology to compensation and wages. I don't believe that the approach to anything should just be how do we save on intercept calls. My thoughts on this are, my experience leads me to believe that the high-end range for a paramedic would be somewhere around $32 per hour. My brain calculates a 2-hour minimum at $64. My brain calculates having to travel each way at another half an hour, and that would compensate the person at $80 for the intercept. And here's my concern, Chief. For you to say that you need to go back and talk with the paramedics about this leads me to believe that a discussion has already taken place about the wages. And regardless of what this board decides based upon that, if a discussion about wages has already been...
That's not correct.
Okay.
That's an assumption on your part that is not correct.
Okay.
That's 100% not correct.
That would concern me. When we were talking earlier and you said I can go back and discuss this with them.
I can go back and say this is what the board
Again,
selected.
I got concerned that the conversation had taken place. And then regardless of what the select board decides, we're already at a deficit because it isn't what their expectations were.
I can assure you that no conversation, the conversation was if I could go out and get a set fee to pay you guys to come out and cover these calls so that we're getting to our people a little bit quicker, and the town's gonna save money on the other end by not paying an outside agency, would that be something you're amenable to? And one of them said, yes. The other one said, yeah, maybe. One of them's a full-time firefighter in another community, so he does this all day long, and it's like anything. The construction worker does that work all day long and then goes home and their driveway is the one that doesn't get taken care of because it's hard to get excited about working in your own driveway, or you pound nails all day building houses, it's hard to go home tonight and fix the cabinets because you've done it all day. And that's part of the problem we run into. We rely so heavily on firefighters with experience, firefighters and EMTs with experience that work in other communities, and they do it all day long on their regular shifts, and then you're asking them to get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to come out and cover something else. And again, the discussion we're gonna have a little bit later about a proposal for 100 full-time firefighters is because you hired me as a fire chief to make sure that we're providing the services that we need to provide, and the system is broke. The system's not working. And this is an effort to try to do this. I don't like where the business is going, but you know, it's where it's at. People are not beating the doors down to come up and do this stuff anymore.
Yes, Dan.
And it's not getting better, except construction everywhere, anything. And if your job is a labor of love, you never work a day in your life. If you don't have that in there, and I love to work and stuff, and I just run a 3-man crew, me, myself, and I. Sometimes we get in arguments, but we're done. Like I said, long hours in, but.
All right. So, I'll make a motion to approve the policy as written, with further discussion around the stipend to be determined.
I'll second it. Absolutely.
So if I could, I look forward very much, and we'll talk about the compensation study later this evening, and I look forward to those results. I think one of the things we talked about in the fire department, and certainly Rick presented the select board with earlier this year, was proposing some kind of a tiered pay structure for his call members based on the training that they have. And so I think it's a possibility that one of the things the select board could review after the compensation study is not having the flat fee for a call member of the fire department responding to calls. And so certainly I think that the compensation study I anticipate would be really valuable for that. Where I think this is different, and I would urge the board to consider it different, is this is separate than in the compensation study, if we recommend a tiered pay system, then that would be any time that person responded, we would pay them that rate. So whether they were responding and maybe it was an advanced EMT and you're really just a transport to the hospital and a basic EMT services would be satisfactory. We would still be paying those rates because it would be based on the qualifications that they have. I think the difference in this situation is the determination is made that a paramedic is needed, and the town has minimal options. The town doesn't staff paramedics. We have paramedics on our call force, only 2 right now, that may or may not be available. It may be in the patient's best interest to have one of our paramedics respond because they may be closer, and that's certainly one of the intents of this policy. But the town's options are to pay, regardless if we're reimbursed, pay $175, $200, or $400 to provide those services to the people in need in Barrington. And so to provide better services by having an in-house paramedic respond faster and to save the town money, I think looking at it directly from compensation of what's the worth of this person's hour of time, this person isn't responding to every call and making that money. This person is being paid for the service they're providing on an as-needed basis with a stipend of these services are needed. We didn't call Frisbee for $175. We're paying you $100 or X dollars for those services because it's in the best interest of the patient and it saves the town money. So I think I would urge the board to consider certainly setting that rate before the results of the compensation study, but also thinking about it different, if you would.
I don't think we made any discussion around, with the exception of one mention of when Tracy talked about the compensation study, but besides that, there was no other mention around when we would set that rate. I think obviously there's more information to be had here, and probably a little more I would like to glean out of it just through going and spending some time with Rick to have a discussion. So that's what I have to say. Tracy?
I think the other thing that becomes important when we talk about firefighting roles, because there are multiple openings throughout the Seacoast, and one of the things we would be doing with this that I'm mindful of is we're now valuing that person's time at a higher rate of pay than even their overtime rate would be on a regular department. And would we then be dissuading them to respond and enter into additional overtime shifts within their full-time departments, chief? Because picking up intercepts is valued and paid at a higher rate than what their overtime would be with their traditional department. So I get concerned by throwing numbers out there for situations like this without justification, because we may be actually self-defeating the industry as a whole by saying, okay, we're going to value your time at $50 an hour, when really at time and a half at your regular department you would be making 33.
So one of the individuals would not jeopardize overtime in his full-time shift. Part of the reason why he does not participate, or very rarely participates, in the EMS on-call program is because he doesn't want to put himself in a position where he's committed to Barrington and he should be going back to the community where he
is employed full-time.
I will say this, we have 4 firefighter EMTs in the town of Barrington that, 3 that work for us on a per diem basis, and one of them works an hourly rate as just comes in to cover calls. And all 4 of them, we work very closely with making sure that if there's a callback within the city of Rochester at their full-time job, we make every effort, if at all possible, to get them back, take them off the clock in Barrington, send them back to cover the city, and then come back to work after that, because we understand how important it is for them to be making sure that they prioritize their full-time job as their #1 priority and their per diem shifts. And that, believe it or not, has worked very well for the town of Barrington over the years. Yes, we've given up a little and lost a man or woman for a couple of hours here or there, but in the big picture, it's actually worked out really well for us, because some departments frown very much on their employees covering shifts in small towns like Barrington, and that's unfortunate, because that hurts the smaller communities like us that depend on somebody to be able to come in and cover a per diem shift. So Barrington is very sensitive to making sure that our part-time people are working. The other paramedic, overtime is not an issue. His job does not put him in a spot where overtime would be even an issue at all. He works part-time for a local ambulance company, and then provides other services, not in the medical field, to compensate for the rest of his family. So I don't see the certainly I understand what you're saying about not heading down the path, but
I don't want you to get in trouble with the other fire chiefs, chief.
well, some of this is leading into the discussion I intend to have with you in a little while, but anyway.
Right, so we have a first and a second.
Hardikoff, aye.
Are there specific pieces of information the board would like the fire chief and I to bring back for further consideration in future meeting of setting that rate? The question would be, what are those specific pieces of information?
The current average Seacoast area paramedic rate of pay. Can help us justify what that would be at time and a half, and multiply that by the 2.5 hours response. And the one other thing that I had listed was the number of annual intercepts that are being performed.
So I can give you those numbers roughly. Somewhere, the number is, on average, McGregor does about 3 a month for us. The city of Dover probably does a half a dozen a year for us. And my budget for Frisbee is based on about 70 intercepts.
7B,
7-0, yeah.
We will work to bring current averages for the Seacoast paramedics and provide some cost analysis for the board at the September 23rd meeting.
Thank you.
So just for my own, I'm sorry to extend this any longer, but so Frisbee is approximately 8 a month. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right, 2020 budget, top of scale wage increases.
So at the last select board meeting, the select board voted to approve a guaranteed minimum 3% wage increase to be integrated into the 2020 budgets. And I neglected, I had in my notes and neglected to bring it up at the end of that conversation, and I apologize to have this conversation at 2 separate meetings. Last year, the select board voted to authorize a 1.75% top of scale bonus for the folks in town that have reached the top of their wage scale. So the question to the board tonight is for consideration of the 1.75% top of scale bonus to represent a one-time or two-time is how the board set it up in April and October, but a two-time payment of that top of scale money that they are foregone based on being at the top of their wage scale. So I've provided for the board the information in 2020. We anticipate that we'll have 10 employees that are at the top of the wage scale. And using that 1.75% top of scale bonus, the anticipated budget impact of the top of scale bonus would be $7,146.
Just because you probably remember, how many people were impacted by it last year?
8 people. So we had 2 new employees that have reached the top of the scale this year, and no census changes which removed anybody from the top of the scale.
I thought it was a productive way in which we did it last year and created a fair measure to make sure we are still recognizing and rewarding our long top of service employees.
And it was our understanding that because it was a bonus, it was not included in the other benefits calculations, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. I feel strongly supportive of this.
Dan?
Well, I support this part. This word guarantee, everything and all this stuff. One thing life guaranteed is death and taxes. And stuff. I'm still waiting on the comprehensive study and stuff. But I still feel the pain. And that's why I've been asking for this. I've been 4th year asking for it.
Well, if we don't address the people at the top of the scale by providing them with some type of bonus program, then we're capping them and exacerbating what we think the results are going to show, which are that some positions may require adjustments. So I'm of the opinion it would be very easy to support indicating that any employee that has hit the top of their pay scale be given a 1.75% increase and that it be split 6 months apart.
I don't have a problem budgeting and stuff. I'm gonna respect the library, everything coming forth, coming and stuff. And I can't hit the taxpayers, myself personally. And then we gotta give the library a chance if we balance this out somehow. I don't know if we can do it or not.
The one thing that I'll indicate is that the Society for Human Resource Management indicates that the turnover of just one employee and having to train them averages about $7,000. So if this, from a retention tool perspective, is used to reward an employee for their longevity and help us retain their knowledge base, I think it's very small money spent to recognize their longevity.
I'm not ignoring that and stuff, but I don't like this word guarantee. I've been seeing everywhere. So.
Honestly, I think the wording of it, the guaranteed minimum 3% wage, even if you took it out, it's still, we're authorizing a bonus of 1.75% plus they get their cost of living increase, which we already approved at the last meeting.
And I'll say just to make it clear, so this would be the select board acting to authorize that increase. And so certainly this would be built into the budget, and the operating budget would be presented to voters in March for approval. So certainly the ultimate decision falls with the voters. They don't have the discrete decisions like the select board does of what ends up in the budget, but they have the opportunity to approve or disapprove a budget. And with an SB2 form of government like the town of Barrington has, if the voters vote to disapprove a budget, the proposed budget, the town uses the default budget, which is a composition of the previous year approved budget with any contractual obligations included. So certainly the voters, Select Person Air, would have an opportunity to make their voices known of increases included in the operating budget by the select board. So to your point that only death and taxes are guaranteed, certainly the decisions by the select board would be contingent on approval by the voters.
So the 1.25% we already voted on at the last meeting.
Right.
So really, we're just talking about the 1.75% for the toughest 10 people at top of scale.
Correct.
Which would be split into 2 payments, so you're gonna be about $3,550 or $3,575 in April and then again in October.
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 1.75% top of scale bonus to not affect benefits, but to be paid twice throughout the course of the work year to employees that will not be able to have a step.
Seconded as well.
Yeah, I know, I have to be consistent because I voted no last week.
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Nap aye. All right. Well, bed trailer replacement.
So I'll invite the road agent, Mark Morrow, to the podium for discussion of 2 topics, including this low bed trailer replacement. I notified the board in private communication prior to the meeting of the structural deficiencies identified by the road agent. So this first item is his proposal to address it. What we're looking for from the board tonight is direction direction based on his recommendation. And so certainly we're not buying a trailer tonight, but we're moving forward in a direction based on the recommendation of the road agent. So I'll turn it over to Mark.
Good evening. As you've all been made aware of, our current low bed trailer is extremely tired. It's uninspected and it's unable to be inspected in its current state. The structural members underneath of it are showing a good deal of decay. The ones that aren't decayed are starting to thin out. You can look at the thing and just tell by the way that the paint is blistering off it that the thing is being stressed. I took it off the road because I don't think we should be exposing the town's liability in such a manner. It's a problem waiting to happen. So the current trailer is a 9-ton unit. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At 9 tons, when we tow our rented excavator, it's maxed out right away without even thinking about it. Next likely step would be a 10-ton trailer. What I'm trying to do is get away from the electric brake situation that's on the current trailer we have, which are totally unreliable, not very powerful. It's antiquated technology. Air brakes, much better, much more effective, stronger, less maintenance, very robust technology compared to the electric brakes. So you can get a 10-ton trailer with electric brakes, roughly 13, 14,000. But here's where it gets interesting. You can get a 20-ton trailer for about 3,000 and change more in 2 of the separate lines that I investigated. That 20-ton trailer will last a lot longer than the 10-ton ever would just from the mere fact that it's not constantly operating at its limit. It's got a lot of freeboard there to play with. The structural components will not be overtaxed on a regular basis. The model that so it was kind of neck and neck between Talbot and Eager Beaver. The model that I would recommend would be the Talbot. In my estimation, it's a better trailer. It's a better trailer. Very rugged construction. Their name has been out there for a long, long time. That trailer, in its bare utilitarian form, no gingerbread, just a basic trailer, $18,856. You could add air assist ramps, and that would bring the total to $23,165. Here again, it's a fair amount of extra money. Would it save people's backs on lifting those ramps up? Yes, it would. I don't like lifting them anymore, but if we're talking dollars, we don't absolutely need the air assist ramps.
Do air brakes require any additional training for any of your staff?
For some, no, because they're already driving air brake vehicles already.
Okay.
So they're already covered.
Thank you.
No. Well, my question was, if you're talking about buying an excavator, and why wouldn't you be talking about buying a 20-ton trailer instead of a 10? For the difference of what, $3,000?
$3,000 to $3,500.
So why wouldn't it make far more sense to go with a 20 than a 10?
Makes far more sense anyway.
Well, I know that's what we felt when we bought ours, but...
Dan?
These are my thoughts, my feelings. We need to spec things out and get what we need and stuff. And then I didn't look at the breakdown of the trailers, but I personally would prefer somewhere less grade on the beaver tail. I don't know what these ones are, and I would want power ramps, air or hydraulics. And then it's gonna save a bag, it's easier on the employees, and then two, the less degree on the beaver tails and slope, or like a paving trailer, you get more stuff on the trailer. And in the winter time, it's all easy to climb up on a trailer when it's frozen.
Tracy?
I have to agree with select person air on the air assist ramps. One workers' comp situation for a back would pay for the air assist ramps, so.
So what is your recommendation then with that feedback?
Well, we know what the basic trailer is going to cost with the air ramps. The variable that we don't know yet, that I have not researched, is the low profile. Would you be talking like a tilt bed type of?
No, the back beaver tail, the design of that trailer. Some eager beavers, are more of a slant. The Talbot might be less gradular. I just think it's more easier to walk equipment up on in cold weather. But I didn't look at the specs of these trailers. It could be, you could have it.
Right. To my knowledge, Talbot only offers their 20-ton in one configuration.
Yeah, but I don't know the degree. It might be,
Yeah.
might be what we want.
Well, I'd have to get that for you.
Well, I can go back and, well, no, I can't. I can look it up. It's just my personal thoughts.
Yeah,
Because in the wintertime, when things are frozen,
Oh.
you try to walk a piece of equipment up,
I get it.
you can go for a ride.
I get it.
We haven't gotten there yet. Connor?
Yeah, so the purpose of starting this conversation was certainly to get the board's feeling on moving forward. What I've heard from the board is support for moving forward with the consideration for a purchase of a trailer. A specification for this trailer would be air assist brakes, either air assist or hydraulic assist. or not brakes, I apologize, ramps. And so what Mark and I will do, air brakes and air or hydraulic assist ramps. What Mark and I will do is we'll take that information, we'll put it together for what the specifications would be, 20-ton trailer, air brakes, air assist or hydraulic assist ramps, and develop that into a request for bid. Certainly an option that the select board would have if you wanted to waive the purchasing policy is to work with the road agent to select a product based on the quotes provided, waive the purchasing policy requiring a bid for a purchase over $10,000, or we could develop a bid specification, receive competitive sealed bids for the board's consideration. Select Person Hardikoff mentioned funding source, so we would have multiple funding sources available to the board for consideration of this purchase. Certainly one of them would be the Highway Heavy Equipment Capital Reserve account, which has a current balance of $200,000. Another option would certainly be taking money from within the highway department that certainly wasn't properly budgeted. We did not budget for the replacement of a trailer, but taking money that has been previously appropriated by voters in 2019 and using that money to make this expenditure. So those would be the two funding sources. I would recommend to the board waiting until March to replace the equipment. If we were to build it into the operating budget, would require the road agent and highway department to rent equipment as needed through the winter. So I would not say it would be the optimal path forward.
Don?
Would this existing trailer that we've got, would this be worth anything as a trade-in, or is it junk price?
It's junk. I mean, you might find some backyard mechanic type of guy that would want to put the time and some steel into resurrecting it, but it will never be a frontline piece of equipment. Never.
So what would be your recommendation with that trailer?
Wait till the price of scrap goes up.
Great answer.
So another thing too, these are my own personal thoughts and stuff, but on Talbot may have a pavement trailer, and they're usually hydraulic air assisted and stuff, and they're pretty flat, you can drive a Corvette up on them. And that's very universal. I don't know what the money would be.
Okay. We'll look into it.
It's not a deal breaker about the degree, I just think you find something.
Yeah, no, we'll look into it.
So would you like the board to develop bid specifications for a sealed bid process, or would you like the road agent to bring back quotes with the specifications as discussed for consideration at the next meeting?
Dan?
Actually, I was very happy. Thank you for this information, and thank you for calling us up. I was able to do and make up a list of questions, and I sat down with Connor. I had everything here. I could find what I needed, and then I had to go on my phone and pull up a little thing to get bounce back and forth. I found information easily.
I'd like to put it in the hands of our road agent to bring back.
Great, you'll see that on the September.
Specifications. We already have three quotes.
I feel like he understands what it is the department needs better than he does.
Great, we'll bring that back for board consideration on September 23rd.
Highway excavator discussion.
Yeah.
So before we get into this discussion, because this excavator has been on our radar multiple times over the 18 months, I think, or so that I've been with this board, and it has sat in my head that we had always recommended considering buying the excavator. So where that puts us in my mind is that we should be doing a spec bid on the excavator and getting that out as soon as possible.
That's the road agent's recommendation.
Dan?
I did my own work. These are my own personal thoughts. When I looked at it and stuff, and I looked for his recommendation and stuff, I look at the mower. That challenge that we got, it's a boat sinking and stuff, right from day one and stuff. And if we can find a machine to bounce back up and replace that thing, so we're dropping money into that, and we can never get out of it. It's a losing proposition any way you look at it. And then And then on the other hand, we can use the excavator too. So we gotta split the difference here. And then with the hours given, what we paid and stuff, I come up with $36.31 an hour. Then you add $14 fuel, oil, whatever, so it's 50. We pay someone $50 an hour to run it. So we're at $100 an hour. So right now, it's costed, when we put hours on the machine, it's cost effective. We save $25. But in his recommendation, on the rubber tire, there's a mini, or there's a big one. There's only one company I know of, and there might be two, Hussein, it's on, that has a mid-range. And then, the one he recommended, I believe personally, would do 60% of the work, but won't do all of it. So we gotta weigh that out, the pros and the cons, and look at the mower. What are we gonna do with the mower? And balance that out. That's my own personal thoughts, because that mower, we're gonna lose out any way you look at it. And the longer we keep it, we're gonna drop money into it, so it's paid off. We paid way too much for it in the first place.
Are you referring to the mower that we used to rub out the sides of the road or
Right.
mow the sides of the roads?
Yeah, we drop. That thing's always breaking down. It's at a time frame. I asked for the quantum 5 years information on the lease, but I looked at it once before. It's a losing battle. And we gotta take a licking to just give up at some point. We would, how much more money are we gonna drop into it? And then the option he's bringing and stuff, that's what I look at personally. I don't know what he was looking at, but that's what I look at personally.
To my knowledge, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
To my knowledge, we owe another 2 years on that Challenger tractor, which I believe is about $30,000. We've got 30,000 left to go. And then we own it.
How does that make you feel?
Dawn?
Does it, what I would like to see, and I've said this over the years, the value of the excavator, rubber tired, against the backhoe. If one can do most of the work, then that's the one we want. If we have to rent a backhoe or whatever, but if you got the same size bucket, you got rubber tires so it can go on the road, I don't see why you need to duplicate the rubber tired backhoe with the rubber tired excavator. But that's just my opinion.
Well, and at first glance, you're right. We have a world-class backhoe that we pay good money for. Nice machine. But from an efficiency standpoint and from a time-saving standpoint, and this is another thing I'm after, we've only got so much time to devote so much manpower to the tasks that we have. If we can do those tasks from the standpoint of what the backhoe and the excavator can do, if we can do those tasks quicker, it will free us up to do all the other stuff that we need to do. So can the backhoe do the ditching? Yes. Your husband did it for years. Absolutely.
Well, the excavator
Can it, it's like comparing a Model T to a Tesla. Can it do it? Yeah, it can. Can the excavator do it better? Yes, it can. And I don't care how good the backhoe is, you'll still never have the capability of the mower.
Mower or the excavator?
So the proposals for a mowing head for the excavator, for increased articulation in getting in and maintaining the ditch line. So it would, the mower specifically is an attachment for the excavator.
I just had one come in and do the hill going up to the well at our B2 location, so I know what it is.
Yeah. The problems you got coming up, not to try to scare you or anything, but this stormwater management deal, when the state finally passes that off to us, it's going to alter the way we treat ditch lines forever after. The current mindset between taking care of our ditches is going away. It's going to take more sculpting, more devices are going to have to be installed in these ditches, like level spreaders, check dams, anything to slow the water down, contain the silt. That's what it's going to be all about. So it's going to get more and more technical as time goes on. Can a backhoe do it? Yeah, but it's going to be very awkward, really awkward.
If you're only gonna still wind up with the same crew, unless you're planning on adding, you're still gonna have 2 men to operate the excavator and or the backhoe. So you're still gonna wind up with the same hands doing the same jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know, I tried to clarify it better and stuff.
I don't have to, I'm a housewife.
I'm not that bright. But basically, by doing this, I'm looking at the whole broad picture and stuff. We spent $4,500 on that Challenger. I've gone through the bills, I've seen $3,000, $4,000 over the years. It's just going down, and I realize it's that much longer. Connor will verify with me, but this is a step forward to fixing a losing battle. Can he find the right machine? I don't know.
So let me ask a question.
So we can, I want to carry on.
Yeah, finish up.
But if we can get some of a happy medium, I personally think that machine will do 60%. Then the back will make up some other difference. But we'll have to hire big machine subs to do different jobs. No matter what we get, we're going to still have subs how to do the bigger work. Or rent a bigger piece of equipment just for a short period of time. That we know coming up, we can't handle it. But that rubber tire excavator has its limitations and expectations. So you guys know that and stuff. But I think he's on the right track. Well, I decided looking at the mower that we're losing out on.
If the mower is that big of a dog, do we think on trade-in we could trade it in toward an excavator with a mowing head? And at least get a break even out of it?
I don't know, I got a feeling maybe anybody that knows anything about mowers probably knows that thing's a dog already. You know, I don't think you're gonna get a whole lot.
So can we try?
No, yeah, try anything.
Right.
Try anything.
Yes, Dan.
We're gonna take a look at it any way you look at it. The way I went back and forth, I was thinking in my mind, I go, oh my God, there's gonna be no way out of this. And then I sit down and find verified numbers to show you. And the expectations of, but it's a sinking ship.
Right.
Aboard.
Sometimes your way out is out.
And the majority of the repairs on that thing, you know, they haven't been monumental repairs, they've just been these little annoying, nitpicky, stupid things, but a lot of them.
Yep.
And it's just like black flies. They're not very big, but annoying.
Yes, Dan.
I'll make a motion for him to demo and then spec it out right. And then two, I personally, I tried the 360 buckets and stuff with a smaller machine and that. If we get the right attachments, it'll make the equipment more efficient and stuff. So my motion is to demo it and spec it out right with the attachments.
So to go a little further, Dan has alluded to the fact that this machine may be a little on the light side. He's absolutely right. I have in my mind that the current machine that we're using is somewhere around 18,000 pounds, give or take. But you cannot find that class of machine on rubber tires, except for maybe one. Let me put it this way: the big three, Cat, Komatsu, Volvo, the exception of Komatsu, but the model that would fill the bill in the Komatsu line, you can't get up here. It's more down south and overseas. For some reason, it's not up here. Already inquired about it. So there's a gap between the 13,000 pound machine that I put in your literature. In any of the major manufacturers, you jump right from that 13 to 14,000 pound range up to 30,000 or better. 30,000 or better, you're going to be into it for 250 grand. Game over. Plus the fact we can't use that on all of our roads because it's too big. So
the one that you've given us, the Volvo EW60E.
Yes.
Is, what's the weight on that one?
That one is between 13,000 and 14,000 pounds.
5.88.
And your suggestion is 18,000?
No, that's what we're using, so we're taking a 3-ton hit. So that's what I'm saying, that machine have limitations and stuff, but the size on our streets and stuff, I personally, if I was running it, I think I could do 60% of the work with it. But there's times, I'm gonna need a bigger machine and more reach. So that's why we still have to be open-minded. But then in my mind, I was really twisting and turning. I was looking at the mower. How can we get out of this? So, are we gonna, this one machine, is it gonna be 110%? No, but we're addressing 2 areas, the size and the mower. Maybe we keep the mower 2 years, and it's still going. We own it, whatever. But right now I'm running 3 different machines. I'm running a 6-ton, 7.5 ton, and a 15-ton. And I'm using them as job needed is up. In Barrington, we got sand over here, we got ledge over here, we got boulders over here, we got all kinds of organics, we got wet spots. One machine's not gonna do it.
No, but I think this also alludes to, is in years past, and every year when we talk about equipment, can we get one piece of equipment and multiple attachments that meet our needs? So like, do we get a piece of equipment that we can put a mower on the end of, a hammer on the end of, like a sand bucket, a gravel bucket, and just, you know, if you need to put a pick, or we put a pick on it, like what are we thinking about it in a way that it will meet as many of the needs as we can, either by renting or purchasing attachments?
I'm all for attachments and spec it out, and I am big on specking heavy duty stuff. My old dump truck out there, right? Town of Southport built that. That thing's a 1989. You got 2 transmissions in it, 2 steering boxes, heavy front end, heavy rear end, and it's still plugging along. Ain't pretty, but she's still
Are we
going.
ready to give some directive to this?
So what I'm hearing and what we can do is develop, Mark can put together, make some more calls about availability to develop a big specification for a sealed bid process for purchasing an excavator. The board will be presented with the bid before it's advertised. We'll spec out what is important to us. In his fact finding, the road agent may take a demo, may try to find machines that he'd like to consider in developing the specifications, bring that back to the board for advertisement. Certainly it's going to be, this isn't going to be a machine that we'll have tomorrow. This would be a machine that would be put into service next season. And so we have some time to do it. It may not be at the 23rd meeting that we have that bid specification ready, but we will bring that back to the board. What I hear from the board is interested in purchasing this piece of equipment, and we're ready to see the bid specification for advertising.
I plan on demoing as many of these things that are as close to fitting the bill as we possibly can before the year comes to an end. There's a few that I haven't gone to yet, finding out a few more all the time. But here again, that void between 13,000 and 30,000, it's out there. It's just a phenomenon.
One thing I had was general commentary for the board. I know in the purchase information that was sent to us, there was a new and used purchase on it, and I guess also a conversation from Mark is what you're feeling on in the bid spec, having a like new or used option for purchase.
Well, if you go used, buyer beware. We went new with the Challenger, and it was buyer beware. So.
I know sometimes you get a cream puff that somebody had that they just didn't run hard and they get rid of it or trade it in.
Potential, potential. Just for your own information, we've spent, since we've started renting the excavator, we've spent about $105,000. Yeah, I think it's 4 or 5 years.
It's pained me since I've been on this
Yeah,
board
I
to
know.
look at it, because I know we could own it by this point.
Yeah.
We'll bring that information back to the board.
Yes, Dan?
Atlantic City, I ran into Kamatsu, and then Duquesne, they had a medium-sized one too. It's I could have bought that. Could have bought that one for 85 grand, brand new. That was like 14.
I bet you were gonna say Senator in Atlantic City with a pocket full of money.
Not 7 foot,
Moving on from this one, are we good?
No, but Anderson, I know they're in Londonderry, they're in New York and stuff. They might have a model, so they might be able to transfer.
Great. All right. Holy Rosary Credit Union and the Christmas stuff naming. I'll
Yes,
ask Chair
Tracy. I strongly oppose this name.
No,
How come?
Because it's not the center in any way of Barrington, and it caused quite a stir when they put up a sign that said town center being built here, and because we have lived with the history of where our town hall was located, where the old school was, where the potential new library community center will be, which is actually on Ramsdale and is the geographical center of our town. I do not like the name Central Square.
Dan?
where were you Saturday? I was down there, and too, I'm not taking sides for anyone and stuff, but I like Main Street. We have no downtown, but you say it, that's our downtown, within that 300 feet. And so I listen to you, not Main Street, but I like Central Square. If you like it or not, that's the center of Barrington, not just geologically, but that's where the little gas pump was and stuff, back in the day, right? Kalos, that's the only place you had gas. And that's the only downtown we ever had. And me come up as a kid and stuff. So I approve Central Square. I gave up Main Street for you. I can't give up two things, sorry.
Dawn?
I don't like it either, so this Central Square. Let's, if you want to keep some of the things that were around many years ago, then look for something that will fit into that.
Easy. Tracy?
So because I only understood maybe 50% of what was being discussed with excavators, I at the same time was reviewing different names that surround the Christmas stub and Christmas Lane. Well, no, you could do, Reindeer Lane, Santa Claus Lane, Prancer Lane, Frosty Lane, Noel Lane. I just think that is what the residents of Barrington are used to, is Christmas Lane is there, the Christmas stub is there. It is not the center of our town. It is, in my mind, not intended to be. It's going to, then call it Village Lane, because years ago, the select board named that the Village District. I just don't think it's the center of our town, and I don't think it should be named Central Square.
I don't either.
So, personally, I don't have an issue with Central Square.
50/50 dozen.
Yeah.
And this isn't for the board's consideration tonight. Andy and I met with the developer and owner of Christmas Stuff to discuss possible names and asked that, they asked that we float that name by the select board. Right. Duly floated.
You got a half. Hold on one second. So I do realize that one thing to keep in mind with some of what you've put out there is, and even the village piece, it becomes too closely connected to some of the other roads, which, if you remember, they had to change the name of the development up where the town hall is going because the upper road was too closely connected to a road in Deer Ridge. Or a village place.
Village place.
Yeah, so if you have a village place or a village center, it won't fly with the 911 system.
Frosty, Prancer, I like all those.
And I think the consideration for, so Holy Rosary Credit Union's financing the road and certainly has the rights for proposing names, I guess, and they were looking to get away from strict association with the Christmas Stuff property. The intent of financing the road was to open up the development opportunities for the land around it. So I think that they were intently avoiding association strictly with the one business that is serviced by the
I
road.
totally understand
Holy
that.
Christmas. There we go.
Let's go back to Main Street.
All right, so,
I'm not even opposed to Main Street. I'm opposed to Central Square. It's not the center of town.
some information for Garth and Brian. You got about a 50-50 split.
We should get going on this pretty soon because they got cones there and then it snows.
They're going because they have one curb cut and have to close,
Within
what's the,
Christmas
Christmas Lane.
30 days.
And need to have a road name to put out there.
They will be here, and I imagine in person on the 23rd to make a formal name request.
Maybe
Okay.
tell them to select a couple, so to give us a little bit of variety.
I'll make that recommendation.
Alrighty. I am going to request a 5-minute bio break for everyone. So we're like 9 o'clock in.
Thank God. And I thought it was going to be a quick meeting.
My
Yeah.
dogs are sitting home,
Alright,
but
so we will reconvene at 9:13. Perfect. Or 9:12, sorry. Alright,
Town Clerk Savvy.
new business.
So, prior to my arrival in Barrington, but in spring of last year, the town clerk presented a proposal to the select board for a succession management plan. One of the challenges she faces in her office is the long length of time required for training staff through the state certification process, which is difficult to do with just 3 staff members for scheduling. So she proposed reducing one of her positions into 2 20-hour positions in order to hire somebody on, get her training started, creating 4 positions. The next step of that process is to revert back to 3 positions. So the town clerk position, a full-time position, the deputy town clerk position, a full-time position, and then the position of town clerk assistant as a full-time position. She's proposing to move to that next step of the process halfway through 2020, so starting in July of 2020. And so the request to the board is to authorize the budgeting of that staffing change. So the first step of the staffing change was properly budgeted for. Again, how we should be making these staffing decisions through the budget process, preparing ahead of time. So the next step of this process would be next year in July, and she'd like to properly budget the wage and budget impact. So in 2019, having those 2 full-time positions and those 2 part-time positions, the wages totaled $130,000 and the benefits totaled $53,000. In 2020, the proposed adjustments in July with the 3 full-time positions, would require 137,000 for wages and 69, almost 70,000 for benefits. So again, looking for the board's support in this next step of the town clerk's succession management plan.
So general commentary that I had on it is, I was really, I remember discussing this and I was really critical about even going the way that we were and talking about how do we utilize, what would it take to train somebody in-house who could be utilized in that role? Are we looking to go to 3 position?
It was always 3 positions.
Right.
It's always been serviced by 3 positions.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and then we split one of the full-time positions into a part-time position.
Into 2 part-time, so took a position into 2 part-time 20-hour week positions in order to still have the staffing to cover the offices as necessary, while that new position, the new hire, is getting trained and starting the certification process. So one of the problems is the state doesn't allow you to start the certification process until you reach a certain number of hours working in town clerk's office. So they have to start working before they can start training. And that would be difficult to do by just replacing one of those 3 people, because they wouldn't be able to do anything for that length of time. So it was a thoughtful development by the town clerk. I'm sure the former town administrator was involved as well. It's worked so far by having the new hires fitting in very well. Training, she really enjoys the work. And so, like I said, the next step, her intention in splitting to 2 20-hour week positions was never to stay that way. Her intent was to go back to 3 positions, and she'd like to do that in July.
So one of these 20-hour positions will go back to being a full-time position.
So the part-time positions will be eliminated, replaced by the full-time position, correct?
So there won't be 3.5 FTEs, they'll just be 3 FTEs.
Yes, ma'am.
But an 18.5% increase in the budget.
So you saw a similar decrease through their proposal, but the reason it's a conversation prior to the budget presentation is because they requested that all department heads making changes that impact their budget have them brought before the board prior to the budget process for your digestion and understanding, so you don't see it for the first time when you're presented the budget. So this is one of those categories, and like I said, I think this is an example of how the system should work with proper planning, and to date, my perspective is that it's worked well. But the next step of the process in July of 2020 will have a budget impact.
Right, but I also remember there wasn't a significant decrease in this budget.
So we can look back at the historical budget and expenditure data, and I'd be happy to pull that up right now. It's open on my computer. And like I said, I certainly can't speak to the full discussion that happened at the beginning. My understanding of the process was, strictly as a succession management process and for training brought to the board in spring of last year. So I can find those budget lines and speak to the depth that you're talking about.
So do we have and just because if we're talking succession management, do we have a timeline on when our town clerk is planning?
So it's an elected position, so she could retire as soon as the board or the community doesn't vote her into the position. Having the backup of a deputy position is very important. She made it a requirement for the new town clerk assistant that she hired be a resident to be able to assume those roles. One of the inherent problems is the 2 staff members that have worked alongside the current town clerk for a number of years have no interest in being the town clerk. So developing that depth farther in advance from when the town clerk may be interested in retiring, which I'm unaware of specific information, but getting other personnel in the office that may at some point be interested or at least have that depth.
Well, I was going to say, have we talked to this person, just that they're interested? And then when we talk about the 2 that are currently in the office, is one of them retiring? Is that the game plan? Is that how we get back to 3?
That is, the understanding of the town clerk is that in July of 2020, she'll be prepared to move to her next step, which would involve the retirement of an employee.
Dan?
This is kind of unrelated, but I talked to Connor. At some point, I want to have a non-public.
So that comes at the end.
I don't know, we don't have to do it tonight, but it has all kind of do with this. Part of my notes, I was bringing it up now. It doesn't have to be tonight. I reserve the right to call it up again.
Other commentary?
The focus is that they offer more extended hours.
I agree.
So be clear, one of the inherent challenges of a governing body being the select board, supervising a department, an employee that's elected, the town clerk has a statutory authority to set her hours. So the select board can, by no action, set the hours of the town clerk.
So not the town clerk, but the town clerk does have staff.
Town clerk has staff, and certainly the deputy town clerk is also written into statute. The town clerk assistant is a position outside of statute, which certainly the select board would have more operational control over than both the town clerk and the deputy town clerk.
So one thing I think we often forget is we are a service to the town, and we need to keep that in mind, that we are here to serve the people of the town.
I don't know who you're alluding to that needs to be reminded of that, but the town clerk's office offers exceptional customer service, serves the residents of Barrington.
Specifically referring to that.
But I will say,
as a board,
Okay.
and everyone here, right, and everyone here needs to keep in mind that we are a service organization, and our job as a board is to figure out how to best serve the residents of Barrington. And as our town administrator, your job is to help us figure out how to most effectively serve the residents of this town.
So
that's not lost on anybody.
One of the large amounts of feedback that is continually given is access outside of a normal workday to be able to perform some of the required registrations. And I think that having the one night a week, no Saturdays, no Fridays, is difficult for some town residents. That is eliminated with usage of more technology.
So I will say we have offered online vehicle registration, which is used dramatically and so that's just for re-registration. You can't initiate a registration that way. I certainly haven't been here when the town clerk's office has offered services on a Friday, but the decision to concede offering services on a Friday for extended hours on a Wednesday was to meet that very need. One of the, outside of business hours, one of the inherent problems of that office is that office can't offer the full suite of services that most residents are looking for, specifically with vehicle registrations, outside of the service hours offered by the Department of Transportation. So if a resident comes in and has a request that can't be fulfilled completely within the office of the town hall, and the Department of Transportation isn't available to offer assistance, that resident would have to come back. So the town clerk has made a concerted effort to make sure that she offers hours in conjunction with when she has that support available to continue to be able to offer the full suite of services for all hours that she's open. Other communities approach the situation in creative ways. Some communities opt to have extended hours on evenings the first week and last week of the month, to typically the busier hours. That's typically met with mixed results based on having the value of having consistent hours that residents can count on versus variable hours which change constantly. There are some communities that offer hours on Saturdays, but again, the full suite of services wouldn't necessarily be offered, so you run into situations where residents would not have their needs met and have to come back. So certainly, if you'd like me to let the town clerk know that you'd like to have a further conversation with her about the hours that she offers the residents of Barrington. As I said, she, as an elected official, it's within her duties as an official of the town of Barrington to offer those services and set those hours.
Dan?
Let's say I went in on Saturday and there's the paperwork and the state's not open. Why couldn't Monday morning they run through the computer of the state and then they just mail it out to the people?
So a lot of times it isn't a matter of the processing. That certainly could be done outside of access to the state. It's not infrequent at all that the requirements that the town clerk's office has for vehicle registration requires the input of the state, that they can't act independently. We're providing essentially a service of the state. We're collecting a good deal of money to provide that service, but those vehicle registrations, the town clerk's office isn't the final say on situations that come up on a regular basis. And so they are, it's infrequent that I'm in that office that one of the three services providers aren't on the phone or trying to contact the state. And they have a large team dedicated to supporting town clerk's offices in all of the situations come up. Maybe the name of the resident is too long and doesn't fit on the standardized form. Maybe the request of a vehicle isn't in the database that they use. There are endless situations that they require support for that the town clerk's office doesn't have the authority to report on.
So let me also ask another one. So it is an elected position. We're ideally grooming somebody who would want to run for that position, but there is no guarantee that they may be the person selected for that position.
Correct. We've been very fortunate in the town of Barrington having a tenured and qualified town clerk to serve the residents of Barrington. And she feels a personal responsibility to develop that succession management so the town isn't left in a situation with an unqualified town clerk serving. And so this plan that she's developed to train and find somebody that may be interested in that position has been successful to date, and she's looking to continue that.
Other commentary or feedback?
It's a lot of money. It was how the department was structured. So basically, we're just being fluid, moving back to how the department was structured. Salem, New Hampshire is a much bigger town than us, with a much bigger population. They don't close their doors at 5:30 each night. They stop vehicle registrations at 5. So,
Dan?
Well, one thing I do, I go right to Concord, allow myself anything I have to do with my trucks and everything, than anything else, titles, I don't even go to town. And then up there in Concord, as soon as you walk through the door, you get a ticket. Once you're inside the door, they shut the door. If they have to stay there past till everyone's done, they stay there.
And our customer service agents in the town clerk's office do the exact same thing.
yeah, they
We don't have a ticketing system.
but they finish. They don't say.
That's common.
So it appears to me that we have one of two options. We either wait until we receive notification and we make the change, or we allow for the change knowing that it will occur at some point in the budget year. It wouldn't be my intention to have 3.5 FTEs for 6 months. It would just be knowing that should this situation occur, that would be the option that would be available.
That upon retirement of one person, the other position
On
moves to
retirement of
full.
a part-time position, then
To full-time.
merging to a full-time position.
And to be clear, it may not be one of the part-time positions that retires. It may be that a full-time position retires and one of the part-time individuals moves into that position and another to the full-time position. There's 4 staff members. The town clerk anticipates that in July of 2020, one of those staff members will retire, and the next step of the process is to revert back to the 3 positions.
So I would make a motion to accept the merging of the two part-time into a full-time and increase the budget to 0.5% wages and benefits.
Upon the retirement of the other position, or are we saying?
Upon notice of vacating a position.
Great.
I'll second that.
Just one last question. How much notice are we talking about? Because if it's like giving you notice a year in advance.
I think 30 days is like from the time that you receive it is when you should notice the FTE.
I would agree. I just don't want to be in a situation where we
Paying for
do that,
full
yeah,
FTE, which
full
would be
FTE.
34,000.
9 months in advance.
Yeah, providing the board the best available information right now. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if the next step of the process didn't happen until after July. That's, like I said, that's the best information that is available right now, and I think this is the responsible way to budget, opposed to just being faced with that situation mid-budget year and trying to scrape up funds.
So I'm assuming that the budgeted amount is based on a full year's worth of budget compensation?
No.
Benefits?
Nope, so my, my wage and budget analysis for that department for 2020 is based on what is actually anticipated to be worked. So the two part-time positions would remain part-time positions through June, at which point those, you know, in this instance, the full-time employee being the one planning to retire, those two positions would move to full-time positions starting in July, and obviously the one full-time position would just have wages and benefits budgeted through June. And so certainly, you know, again, we're planning with the best available information that exists right now. Certainly it would be the responsibility of the town clerk to work within the confines of her budget to provide the services and staffing that she needs to if, you know, any number of those variables change next year.
Okay.
So this is as an exact of a budget as we can put together based on what we expect to happen.
Okay. Other commentary? So we had a motion,
Wait a second.
second, vote.
Yeah, no, just lack of information. I don't know if we do.
Dan, what would you like for additional information that hasn't been provided?
That'd be non-public.
Don?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
The next item, I'll invite Fire Chief Rick Walker to discuss staffing proposal for 2020 and for consideration on the town warrant. And as the chief distributes some materials, it's not the chief's or my intention that certainly the board would make a decision. It was listed as a discussion topic on my report. And so I anticipate the board will have a discussion, and the discussion will continue beyond this evening.
I thank you for the opportunity to speak to this issue of the potential support of a warrant article in 2020 to hire 2 full-time firefighters. What that would do is that would bring us up to 4 full-timers in the chief's position, my position, and the intention would be is that they would work on there's a number of different systems that the fire service uses. The system that I'd be proposing is on an 8-week cycle, they would work an average of 42 hours a week. 6 weeks out of that 8-week cycle, they would work two 24-hour shifts, and the other 2, they would work a 24-hour shift, and it rotates every week, so it moves out a day every week. So if it's Monday and Thursday, so it's the proposal would be work a day, 2 days off, work a day, 4 days off, work a day, 2 days off, and so on. The kind of the reason why this discussion is kind of twofold right now. I'm not one to jump up and down, the sky is falling and that you gotta give me. I think the town has been very supportive of the department, they've been very supportive of me. This board, for the most part, has been very supportive of me and my efforts to provide to you what I believe the direction that we need to go in as a community. I think that you folks hire a fire chief and you depend on the fire chief like any other department head to explain to you what it is that we need to do to provide the services to the community and how we can most effectively do that. And so the purpose of this conversation is kind of twofold. I certainly had no ambition that I was going to walk up here tonight and throw down this piece of paper in front of you and say, I need you to give me $150,000 or $160,000 next year to hire 2 more full-timers. I understand that that's a pretty significant impact to our taxpayers, one of which everybody in this room is a taxpayer, myself included. But it is my job to help you folks to understand. I'm proud to say that nobody's been left in the lurch. They haven't called 911 and we haven't been able to provide the service. And that's a credit to the staff that you have and the volunteers that you have, and we're getting it done. But the problem across the country is when you start looking at, there's places out in Pennsylvania and stuff like this that relied strictly on volunteer fire companies, and they're closing up because they can't get people to come out and do this stuff. And we're all struggling. It doesn't matter whether it's we're all faced with the same thing. We don't have people beating the doors down, coming in and wanting to do this stuff. And what's concerning to me right now is that I cover a lot of calls, and I'm okay with that. I'm in a spot in my life where I can do that, and that's okay. But what's not okay is that if I left tomorrow morning, or I dropped dead tomorrow morning, or I retired tomorrow morning, whoever you hire to come in and take my place is probably not going to be able to do what I'm doing, and the town's going to have a lot of holes to fill. And that's the concern, is that what we, and don't take this and I'm saying this, that I'm building myself up, because that's 100% all what this is about, is, I come out in the middle of the night and cover calls, and I cover some other stuff that I'm okay with doing, and as Dan says, it's more of a labor of love to me than it is a job, so I don't mind doing it. But I do understand the fact, and I hope I'm not leaving anytime soon, that when, what's concerning to me is putting the town in a position so that that's not being fair to you, the Board of Selectmen or the taxpayers or something. If I walk in here tomorrow morning and say, look, the only thing you can do is throw all this money down here and hire a bunch of people to do what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to avoid. But what I'm trying to propose with this potential warrant article is that we would hire 2 more full-time people. They would work on a rotating schedule, so there would be one person on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They'd be the anchor position, and that's where you see it's an A, B, C, D, so they each have their own schedule. And kind of what that is just to kind of show you, give you kind of a little bit of a visual of how that type of a system works. And then we would still continue to fill the daytime 12 hours just with a per diem. And then at night, what I would try to do is continue down the path that we already are, is we're budgeting, you have graciously budgeted our department to allow us to put per diem people in on the weekends. I hope to get that started sooner rather than later. We're just trying to get the bunk room finished up so there's a place to sleep. But my intention would be is that on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when people want to go off and do things on their own and they want to be with their family and stuff, that we would have 2 people on staff, so there'd be a per diem person at night on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, but there'd only be 1 person. As of right now, we have 2 per diem, but if you had a full-time, there'd be 1. And then during the week, Monday through Thursday, I would continue to fill that with 1 EMT on call and a firefighter on call. So, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. When you hire staff and you put staff in to cover calls, and then sometimes it can work against you, and people go, well, I haven't had to go on a call for 2 weeks because we've had staff in there to take care of it, and they all of a sudden decide that, hey, you know, it hasn't bothered me not to get out of bed in the middle of the night, so maybe I'll just not do it. So it is a double-edged sword, and it's imperative to understand that an ambulance, a typical ambulance call, or most of the ambulance calls we cover, can be handled by 2 people. And the vast majority of the fire calls we cover can be handled by 2 or 3 people. But it's that 20% of the calls that do require a bunch more people. So it's imperative that we maintain a good, strong call force, and that we work in the direction which I think I've had discussion with you folks in the last year or 2 of that's the direction I really think that we ought to be in, is it's cheaper for us to pay good money for somebody to be on call and have them come out and cover the call and be paid only when we need them than it is to pay good money for somebody to be there 24 hours in case we need them. But the bigger point in this, the bigger thing that I really want the 5 of you to see and Connor to see in this document is that the system that we've known for so many years isn't working anymore. And this isn't a Barrington issue. It's not a you know, there's full-time departments. They struggle. They struggle to get their full-timers to come back because they're full-timers when they're not on shift in some cases. Either live far enough away that it's not reasonable to go back in, or they have another job to supplement their family income and they can't leave that job to go back to their primary job. So it's not I don't want you to think it's a Barrington problem, and I don't want you to think that the problem that we're in dire straits, but I think I've shown you folks that I'm not one to stand here and ever been one to stand here and say the sky is falling, because that's just not the way I try to operate. But I think it is imperative for the 5 of you to understand that the system, the volunteer system, the expectation that people are going to continue to come out and volunteer to do this stuff for a little bit of money, that system isn't working anymore. It's not working for anybody, and we're going to have to look at creative ways. And many communities look at the fact that the natural progression is to have 1 person on a single shift by themselves, so there's at least somebody available, and then you're backfilling with other things. You know, you'll see a little information about the EMS on-call, in which we pay $4 an hour for somebody to be at home. We'll give you, the town basically gives somebody a $50 bill to sit at home, and when it's time to go to bed, go to bed. And if we get a call, get out of bed and come out and cover it. We have 6 or 8 people that participate in that program. Some of them take a shift every other week. Some take 1 shift a week. A couple of them take 2 shifts a week. They have one guy that he'll take 3. And inevitably when we don't get a shift filled, then I end up covering it. And again, I'm not opposed to covering it, but it's more the point that I'm really trying, what I'm trying to show you is that it's a fragile system at best. We're getting it done. I'm proud to say that we're, in the last 2 years, because of the people that you have, some of the volunteers and some of the paid people, that the only time that we haven't been able to provide an ambulance coverage is if we were already out on our own. And now we have the backup ambulance, and you know, if we have a couple of people, we're trying to get out there and cover them. But again, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for me to stand here and say to you, because I understand what 2 firefighters, rough numbers, you're looking at $80,000 a person by the time you give them their benefits. $160,000 is a lot of money. But I really, when in talking to Connor, I really didn't think it was fair to walk in during the budget time and have this discussion. So that's really why I wanted to have a quick 5-minute discussion. I threw some stuff on paper. Connor and I talked some about the money going into the revolving fund, and the money that not the revolving fund, that goes in the general fund from ambulance collections. And originally I started down that path, and kind of at the last second, I kind of told him this morning that to me that's kind of more of a smoke and mirrors kind of thing, because if we're collecting $140,000 a year for ambulance revenue, and $70,000 goes into the revolving fund to cover an ambulance, and $70,000 goes into the general fund, the expectation is that $70,000 in the general fund is helping to buy down the taxes in some way, shape, or form. It does something to help offset what our tax rate is. So it might sound good for me to go, here's a feel-good thing. I'll tell the taxpayers that we could take that $70,000 and offset that $160,000 I'm asking for, and really only have to raise 90, but that's not true. We're raising it. We got to raise the whole thing. So, in fairness, if we go to the voters with this, the voters should know that, hey, here's the expected cost. If you folks decide that you want to, if you people feel that the need is there to spend your money in hiring 2 more people as full-time employees, that here's the actual true cost that is going to be to all us as taxpayers. And that's really why I went away from not tying the revolving fund into it.
Have our calls increased, Chief?
Our calls on the ambulance side typically stay up there. We're running around 1,100 calls a year. And that's really part of the problem. I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I joined the fire department in the late 70s, the ambulance squad was brand new. We typically waited for one to come out of Somersworth, at Beverly, or Rochester, or Dover. But on the fire department, we ran about 60 calls a year, and they were all fires. So to be available to cover what amounted to be 5 calls a month wasn't a huge strain on me as a volunteer. But now when I sit there and say to my volunteers that, we're averaging 1 a day on the fire side, that is a little bit more of a strain. And then you accompany that with the fact that people are getting pulled in a whole bunch of different directions, and, you know, it's one thing to get out of bed because of an emergency. It's another thing to get out of bed because, you know, it's a lack of an exciting call, if you will, and, you know, that just, well, the chief will get up and he'll take care of it, and that's okay, again, but it's, at some point, you know, this is really twofold. One is I wanted to give you a little bit of information so that you could look through it at your convenience, and certainly if you had any questions, then I'd be happy to answer them.
I assume you have mutual aid agreements with Rochester, Dover, Lee, Northwood.
Correct.
So if there was a situation where there was not someone to respond, it would then go to a mutual aid department?
Correct. I mean, that's pretty much the same with all of us. You know, Barrington, in reality, Barrington ends up in going out of town to help other communities more than they come in to help us, but every community could say the same thing. And again, the one thing I wanted to stress the most out of this is, I think this is a big enough decision that what I'm really hopeful is that at the end of the day, I can convince the 5 of you that you think this is a big enough decision that you'll support putting it on a warrant article to allow the voters to decide whether they want to invest their funds that way.
Just a general comment I have on that. Putting it out to the voters from my end is a little concerning, just because from the standpoint is if it goes to the voters to be voted in, it has to go back to the voters to be undone. Not that I would ever anticipate it going lower.
No.
But it already, but and from a staffing end, it's not the right track to do it, because what it does, it fosters any other department to want to do the exact same thing and start blocking positions.
I see what you're saying, but part of the issue is when my position was filled and when John Booty's position was filled, both of those were by a will of the voters. And at the end of the day, where I would disagree with what you're saying is the 5 of you are responsible for determining what the voters vote the bottom line of a budget. Now, you know, in as much as you can stand there and pass the budget and say the fire department was going to get X number of dollars, and police gets X number of dollars, the highway department gets X number of dollars, and that's most of the voters think that when they vote in support of a budget that they're supporting what each of us asked for individually. But the fact of the matter is all of us as voters, we vote the bottom line.
Right.
And that it's up to you folks to determine what that bottom line is, meaning that, you know, you could stand there and say, look, you know, we didn't anticipate that the Green Hill Bridge was going to cave in and we need $1 million to fix that bridge, and your job is to go back and say, all right, I'm going to take this much from this and this from this and this much. So all over the country, there has been times when, you know, in different communities where funding has become an issue and budgets have gotten tight, and they talk about rolling layoffs in which they close stations. They rotate stations through and close substations and don't fill positions and stuff like that. Certainly, you know, I would hate to see that. I mean, you know, if we're going to hire people, we hire people, but I also understand that there's only so much water in the well, and when we take the last cup of water out of there, it's mud after that. So again, this is really twofold. I want to make sure you guys understand where we're at. I think that I'm going to just say it again. It's imperative that you folks sooner rather than later look at making sure that the 2 full-timers that you have there now are being properly taken care of. One of them left because money and the 24-hour schedule. The other full-timer that's been there for a long time applied. He's a finalist. He's looking for a 24-hour schedule and money. So it's concerning to me because if, you know, I'd be the first one to stand here and say that if, you know, if there's 30 people waiting to beat on the door, then we get to kind of decide what we're going to do. But I also don't think that you should be paying. You know, I think you just have to. I thought I made a pretty good argument last budget cycle that my people were underpaid, and I still believe they're underpaid. I think people on this board believe they're underpaid. I think it's just unfortunate that we have to wait for a compensation study to come back and say, look, they're underpaid and you should have done something a while ago for them. So,
we're 45 minutes into 2 5-minute discussions, and we have 4 other things to finish up. What is it we need with the staffing proposal?
I was going to give Dan final comments, and then if we want to talk about staffing proposal, we can do that, but Dan's been waiting patiently for 10 minutes.
I've talked to Brent probably a couple of years ago. I can see the town going full-time is up, and then both me and him, he's ought to be later, not sooner, but I see it happening. It's up. And then 2, when the warrant articles 2 and the budget's up, there's still a lot of people in town are scoring over the town hall being torn down because it was a part of the budget they overlooked. And that's why being more transparent and stuff, it's okay for me.
Now, conversation on staffing, starting to bring up something about the staffing article, or staffing, or compensation, sorry.
In reference to the compensation study, Chief, I understand your feelings about waiting. It would be very unfair, in my opinion, as we embark on a compensation study for the entire town, to have carved out one department, address an issue with the one department, and leave the rest of them waiting. So I respect your feelings about it. I also think that the approach that the compensation task force took was an appropriate response to the entire group of municipal employees, as opposed to honoring one group with an increase before looking at the results of the study. In reference to the staffing proposal, 2 things you said in your discussion really stand out to me. And one of them is the devaluing of the call and volunteer force by having 2 more paid employees and placing them on the fringe of potentially feeling that they're not needed when they are. And the other thing that really stood out to me is that we more often go mutual aid than receive mutual aid. And that would indicate to me that the existence of our fire department is certainly beneficial to those that abut us and are around us, but that it would maybe indicate there isn't a need for the 2 additional positions.
I would respectfully disagree with you. And again, you have to put it into the perspective of that. I think you could go look at the numbers in the city of Rochester, and it would show that they go out of town and provide aid to other communities more than they receive it on their end too. The issue with going out of town and helping somebody else more than you're getting it on your own is the fact that for the most part, we're not asking for just one community. When we start bringing in, like if we strike a first alarm structure fire or a first alarm assignment in the town of Barrington, that the very first shot is going to bring 3 communities into Barrington. If we go to a second, it'll bring another 2, and they go on out through that way. Well, that's why you have a tendency to be used more out of town than bringing stuff in on your own. And again, I don't disagree. You know, we have conversations with our people about, look, the town has an obligation to provide these services. And it's up to the town fathers to determine at what level we can afford to provide service. And it doesn't matter whether it's fire protection or rubbish removal. We provide the service, and we have to determine what the level is. And if you people come out and cover these calls and you're able to take care of this so that we don't have to hire people, then the system is working. But when there's times when people are not available, and that we don't have a choice, which is really why the town of Barrington is where we're at right now, and the fact that there's 3 of us there during the day right now. I have typically, if we get a call during the day, I can depend right now on picking up 1 more person. That's how tough it is. Other than that, it's mutual aid. So again, I think it behooves us to stop the conversation right now, because you know, we could go on about this for hours. It's really more to, this was really twofold. One is to, without saying the sky's falling, because that's not what I'm saying, and without saying that, you know, we're not, you know, I don't think we're any worse off today than we were a year ago. The fire service as a whole is changing. I really, you know, I don't think you can point your finger at anything to say here's why we got from running a volunteer to paid people. But the sad fact is, the part that I'm trying to stress, and I've tried to stress to you folks on a number of occasions, is that I'm not trying to compete with the employees in the city of Rochester. I'm not trying to compete with the employees in the city of Dover, but the town of Barrington does have to compete with the communities our size. And it has to be compensation, and it has to be a number of things. And again,
we've been going on for quite a while, so at this point I'd like to table this conversation, let people go digest it, come up with questions, and then we can come back and have a conversation on it. But I think we've really run our course with this.
Yeah, I agree. And if you would be so kind as, if you had questions, if you could forward them either to Connor or myself, so that I can, much like the library did, I'll come up with some answers for you and get them emailed back to you, so that you have the opportunity.
So you're 5 minutes with that one. 20 minutes ago you were 10 minutes in the hole. So let's see if we can keep the fire department tanker discussion a little closer to on task here.
Chief, I read through this before you begin to speak. So you need both a pump replacement to get the tanker serviced and running again, and then in the future need to do one of 2 things, which is either budget to buy a new one or replace the cab and chassis on the current one, correct?
Sort of.
Okay, so there's more to it than this. Go ahead.
The pump went down the tanker. Round numbers, we're talking $7,000 to $10,000 to put a pump in that truck. The problem is we are right in the middle of we have a truck committee together to replace that truck. That truck is scheduled to be replaced in 2020. If this was 5 years ago and the pump fell out, I'd be coming to you and saying, look, the pump fell out of the truck and it's going to cost $10,000 to fix it, and we're fixing the truck. The problem I'm having right now is, because this truck is due to go away in about 10 or 11 months, or 12 months, based on when I come forward to you and say this is what we want to do when the truck cab and chassis gets ordered and blah, 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 I can't justify spending $10,000 on a pump for a truck that we're gonna get rid of in a year, and the trade-in value is $10,000 to $15,000. Them numbers just don't make sense. But we really can't afford to go a whole year without the tanker. So my truck committee right now, and I apologize, there's all kinds of balls in here. Right now, one of the things we're looking at is a chassis remount. We would buy a cabin chassis, we would have that plastic body taken off that truck, set on the new truck, and I apologize, the numbers I gave Connor are a little bit misleading. Round numbers, just round numbers, a cabin chassis remount, we're looking at $200,000. If we buy a fire truck, we're gonna just trade that one in, we're gonna buy a brand new truck all ready to go. It's about $300,000. So there's about $100,000 savings. That in Rick Walker's mind makes a $8,000 or $9,000 pump refurb a whole lot more palatable, because we'll say, all right, while I still don't like the idea of wasting all this money, we're going to do a $90,000 trade-in. One of the guys called me today, Eric, he's the chairman on the truck committee. He got a line on a truck that maybe a brand new truck. It's a spec truck sitting on the lot, and it may be around a little over $200,000. So he was going to do a little more research to see if it was what the town's looking for. What I really don't want the guys to do, I'm not going to be around 25 years if that truck's going to be here, but I really don't want them to settle. I really want them to make sure that if they come back and they were going to buy a spec truck, that it's a spec truck that the town will want. I don't want them to just, hey, we got to settle for this. So this is a big ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. What I would like you folks to do is authorize me to spend the money to put a pump on that truck if at the end of the day I believe it's in the best interest of the town dollar-wise to be able to do that. And the reason I'm asking for that is that I really don't want to wait till the 23rd to come back and say, look, we want to go in this direction, and the best thing to do is put a pump in now, get by for a year, and we're going to do a chassis remount. So I'm kind of asking you to trust me that giving me the authorization to trust me that I do the right thing and what's in the best interest of the town.
So my general comment on that is I don't think you need to ask us, because that's just part of your maintenance of your truck and equipment to go with a pump in it.
He's kind of asking for a waiver of the purchasing policy to hand select who would replace the pump, which would require board action.
Well, that is what he asked.
Well, I read between the lines.
So I make a motion that we allow him to waive the purchasing policy and get this pump replaced and get the tanker up and running again.
Dan, what's your question, comment?
I'm confused on the chassis. You want to swap over? That's all new gear?
It's a future conversation. That's just a component. We can't make a decision about the pump without considering that, because it's a topic of conversation. But the action for the board tonight is waiving the purchasing policy to replace the pump on the truck. Because Rick Walker, your fire chief, believes that's what's in the best interest of the town.
I've made a motion to waive the purchasing requirements and allow the chief to make the appropriate decision on the
Do you have somebody that you're looking to
Anybody
have
want a second
put a
this?
pump in there?
So, yes, there's a local mechanic, Jerry McKay, he's the one that took the pump out to see if it was repairable, and he goes, you're gonna have about the same money in rebuilding it as to put a new pump in it. Yeah, so, but we talked to the gentleman from Dingy Machine, he came down and looked, and the problem is a new pump may be 12 or 14 weeks away, the parts to rebuild that one may be sitting right on the shelf, but again, if You know, if by the time we get done figuring all the pieces out, and again, it's, you know, if it looks like at the end of the day that we're gonna go in the direction of getting rid of that truck, I'm not gonna put a pump in it because it just doesn't make sense.
So you're putting a new pump in it or a rebuilt pump in it?
It'd be a new pump.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Here, I.
That's right.
Rick, I'll buy.
Nap aye.
Thank you.
All right.
So the next item on the agenda is refund of partial payments. So statutory process for deeding requires the board to direct the treasurer at the advice of the tax collector, any partial repayment of property that the town deeded. We can't properly deed a property. We can't properly deed a property if they've paid a portion of the lien they were using as justification to deed the property. So there's 3 properties listed, and I'm asking for 3 separate actions from the board to direct the town treasurer to refund partial payments.
I will make a motion to direct the town treasurer to refund partial payments for map 17, lot 122, sublot 3 for partial payment of 2016
I'll second that.
In the amount of $1,000.
in the amount of $1,000.
And I'll second that $1,000.
Here, I.
That's right.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye. I will also make a motion to direct the town treasurer to refund $300 to map 104, lot 44 for a partial payment of a 2016 lien.
I'll second.
Nap
Here,
aye.
I.
That's right.
Hardikoff, aye.
There you go. And I will also make a motion to direct the town treasurer to refund $27.31 to map 19, lot 44, sublot B for partial payment of 2016 lien.
And I'll second that.
Here, I.
That's right.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye.
Great, thank you. The next item, the town took a property many years ago. It was recently vacated over the summer, as we've done and the board previously supported. We've been working with the cooperative to find a suitable buyer. We just own the trailer, we don't own the lot. They found a suitable buyer, and I'd like to ask the board to transfer the property to the co-op so they can finalize the sale with the new buyer and we can start collecting taxes again.
I will make a motion to transfer the trailer to the
Barrington Oaks Cooperative.
Barrington Oaks Cooperative so that they may sell it to their suitable buyer.
And we may begin collecting property
And we may
taxes.
begin
And I would
collecting
second that.
Here, I.
That's right.
Hardikoff, aye.
Nap aye.
Thank you. Next item, compensation study award. The town received 1 response to our request for proposals for a compensation study. Compensation study task force met to review and recommend that the board does support the 1 proposal we received. It is important to note for the community listening at home and the board, we did seek responses from the 8 solicited firms for this request for proposals. I actually heard back from a good chunk of them. And quite frankly, the reasons they cited for not submitting a proposal are reasons we wouldn't want them to participate in this process anyways. Citing that they don't typically do the work in the level of detail we were asking. Cited that they had other work priorities that took precedent, and some citing that they don't typically do a lot of work in New Hampshire, so it would be very expensive for them to do the work that we're requesting. The firm that submitted the 1 bid is MRI out of Meredith. They do this work all over the state. It's a $15,000 bid for all the services we requested. That's the recommendation of the compensation study task force to authorize the town administrator advised by that task force to enter contract negotiations with MRI for the compensation study.
Dan?
Isn't that MRI, that's where you get interns from?
They have a suite of services that they offer municipalities across the state. Compensation study, they partner with a human resources consulting firm out of Massachusetts to provide, in conjunction, services.
I don't, does anyone else do that?
We had 1 bidder.
Tracy?
So I reviewed the 3 professionals that would be contracted through MRI, and their background certainly would facilitate a very robust and full suite of the compensation and total rewards review that we asked for. So the interesting response from all of the other companies was that the compensation task force had provided pretty rigid, stringent, robust requirements of what they were looking for as far as the study. And I was very happy with the response and the proposal that was provided by MRI as well as the price tag.
Make a motion to allow the town administrator to enter into contract with MRI for the incorporated price of $15,000.
I'll second the motion to get it back on the tax roll.
Nap aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
That's right.
You're right.
Thank you. That's all the business I had to cover. Thank you very much for your time.
Select persons reports. Mr. Ayer.
Oh, good news. I went to conservation, and then the plan board has the wildlife encounters we have coming up on Beauty Road, reviewed his site plan. We gave comment, you'll hear about that at the meeting. And then, they got a rough budget, $323,000 in their account. So, it's a lot more than I thought they had. I guess here's the thing. I guess the, and get it on written from Lynn, but she did get a copy of it. So they have money in their account.
Okay.
Rec department meetings next week.
We have one that's continued at this point, and I'm assuming it's going to be, but we'll know the day before.
Right. Bear with me here as I pull up my notes. All right. So we had a meeting with Holy Rosary and also with the Christmas stuff, which we talked about around naming. We also talked about kind of envisioning around town center, or sorry, not town center, around Christmas Lane and what they're looking to do there. Just find all my notes here. Too many emails open. So some of what was talked about was around Holy Rosary putting a commercial branch in that area, looking at the residential in the back. The big challenge that they were running into in general was really somebody needing to put the road in, which is why they took on the kind of the base to do that and get that road put in there. That way the rest of the area could ultimately be built out. In conversation with them, they really want the town to be part of the process. Whether it's us providing input as to what we see there, obviously the town hall idea has sailed, but they had some very thoughtful inquiries about utilizing, like, is it still a possibility for the library or something of that sort to end up down there. They asked about rec department needs and the facilities, as well as we discussed police department needs and or the whole, kind of just the needs of the town as a whole as we're moving forward and what we're looking at. And I also provided them with just some general little examples of things that I've seen in other communities, such as a downtown that they had, or downtown-like area that they had built out up in Williston, Vermont, and gabion boxes that they used for a tiered theater system that just have a nice deck on them. So they created a tiered, almost kind of like a concert venue, I guess is how I describe it. I don't know what's the right term for it.
Amphitheater.
Amphitheater, thank you. So we had that conversation. The planning board met and went over, I said I have 100 emails open for me. Went over wildlife encounters, looking to do a expanded development of their property up on Beauty Hill Road, using it for agritourism, which is an allowed use in its current state, but also looking at would they have the ability to grow it a little more to house some of their other animals up around that space.
Do they need special permitting for those species?
Yes.
Not all.
Yes,
There's a handful of them that do, and a fair chunk that doesn't as well.
I think it's a really fun, neat opportunity for the town.
So there was that, and
Have we handed over to Holy Rosary the village plan that originally existed from years back? We have.
quite a while ago.
Okay.
Bear with me, I'm just looking at everything.
That's it, Village Square.
And I will just add two on those things.
Yes,
Would you like us to recommend that name today?
that kind of makes sense,
Village
doesn't
Square?
it?
Okay. We'll make that recommendation.
No,
No, Village,
no.
too close to Village Place.
Yeah,
Oh, we have, sorry.
yeah.
Holy Rosary Credit Union and Garth Svensson of Christmas Dove have meetings scheduled on October 1st with both the recreation leadership and the library leadership to discuss that area. Those meetings were scheduled as a result of the meeting Andy and I participated in.
Interesting.
I think for the most part that pretty much covered everything that I have been to. Building committee has their RFP and everything else, so nice job to all of them who took part in it and have
That was
been
amazing.
like cranking away to make that happen. And looks like there'll be a meeting next Thursday at 1 o'clock to
Open bids.
get everything ready to roll, so we can come back.
We did have 9 firms show up to our pre-submission meeting, which I was very pleased with the turnout and interest in the project. So hopefully those firms and others follow through with a submission, which we'll have on the 19th. The Town Hall Building Committee is also reviewing a draft of an RFP for a clerk of the works or owner's representative that will be brought to the board on September 23rd.
A lot of emails.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I'll accept personal responsibility for most of them.
All right. That's the end of what I have. Tracy?
So 2 issues that I would like the select board to begin to address. One of them is the parking ordinance. While I completely understand the need to make sure that our roadways are free and clear and that certainly emergency vehicles can respond as needed, there are, in my mind, multiple neighborhood roads where parking on one side or the other for purposes of an event would block absolutely nothing in the way of emergency travel. And I had asked for a copy of the parking ordinance and read through it. I'm really perplexed why we actually, in a town like ours, have not figured out how to be less regulating with that policy. That's my own personal opinion. And then I would like us, in the course of looking at next year's revenues, would like us to adjust the single elderly exemption. It was the one exemption in comparison to other municipalities where we were slightly behind in comparison to what we allow for the other exemptions.
If I'll just speak to that, just put it on your radar. My intention is to bring to the board an updated discussion for exemptions and credits on October 7th, the meeting of October 7th. So that meeting, the town's assessor's agent from Corcoran Consulting will be here to present the results of her revaluation that they've gone through this year. And she'll also be available to discuss process and implications for adjusting the exemptions and credits that we offer as a subject matter expert. So that conversation will happen on October 7th. In advance of that meeting, I'll have an updated exemption and credit analysis memorandum for the board. I presented that back in April, which reviewed, local and statewide exemption and credit levels where we are with the town of Barrington. So that information will be updated. That discussion will happen. The 3 items which I expect the board will act on at that meeting, one would be the single elderly exemption, income and asset limits. I know Select Person Bailey will make a case to the board to increase the 100% disabled credit for veterans from $2,000 to $4,000, again, to put on the warrant for a town decision, and also recrafting language for our solar exemption to cover all of the assessed value that may be added in the future. But we'll discuss all of them. We can do it at that meeting, October 7th.
The one question I will have is fully disabled veterans, in addition to their Social Security, what is the federal amount that is provided to them for income?
I can research that information and try to make it.
That will help us make a very well-educated decision about whether to increase the veterans exemption as allowed by the state, based on whether it's financially necessary, based on
What they're getting for, it's not really compensation, it's
benefits.
benefits, thank you.
I will work to make that information available.
Dan? Do we need it on public?
Yes.
Alrighty. For what?
Reputation. Do you want to open up another public comment?
Yes, last public comment. Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. So we will be going into non-public for reputation. We do not intend to make any announcements when we come out.
Correct. It needs to be seconded and voted on.
I'll second.
Okay.
Dawn will second it.
Bye-bye.
Hard enough, aye.
That's right.
Great.